Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Naruto Lost the War but Won the Harem, Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
He had not succeeded. Failed to keep his family safe. Failed to defeat the person who had wreaked such suffering and devastation. Couldn't defeat Madara. At first, the final battle had gone smoothly. Sakura had betrayed everyone, and Naruto had initially killed Sasuke. Her apparent love for Sasuke and her fangirl tendencies appeared to have distorted her judgment. Without the use of the Kyuubi's chakra, Naruto had managed to hold Madara at bay. Their assaults had been so strong that they had broken trees, leveled mountains, and made enormous craters. However, things had gotten worse by the time Naruto's friends seemed to be able to help. Madara had taken advantage of Naruto's moment of distraction by moving behind everyone and killing them all without a word. They were gone by the time Naruto had uttered a warning. He lost it when he realized that all of his loved ones, friends, and surrogate family were no longer there. Naruto finally lost it after years of mistreatment, neglect, and loneliness, letting loose all of the fox's chakra. And he destroyed every square inch of Madara with one enormous Rasen Shuriken, leaving behind a massive crater that dwarfed any he had ever seen. Think of the crater that was Konoha after Pain's invasion times 3. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze was now standing in the broken remnants of Konoha, with his friends' bodies lying at his feet. They're all gone. Shikamaru, Choji, Ino, Kiba, Hinata, Shino, Neji, Tenten, Lee, Kakashi, Kurenai, Guy, Shizune, Tsunade, and even little Tenten. Before he passed out due to the effects of his mental and physical exhaustion, the young man gazed at them with teary eyes. The mindscape of Naruto. Naruto just stared straight ahead as he stood in front of the cage that held the Kyuubi. "Hey kid, how you holding up?" The giant fox said softly after sadly staring at her. "Yes, the Kyuubi is a girl in this, jailer." After giving the fox a blank stare, Naruto collapsed to his knees and started crying. They're all gone. Every one of them. He broke down. With an equally dejected tone, the fox simply sighed and said, "Yeah, I saw, and, for what it's worth, I know how you feel." Naruto's head jerked up, and a crease formed on his forehead as his eyes went from sad and teary to angry. "How do you know what it feels like to lose those precious to you? All you are is a being made of chakra. So tell me, how is it you know how I'm feeling as you've never cared before?" he screamed. "Yes, I do know how it feels. I lost my best friend on the night of my attack, and before you ask who, it was your mother," Kyuubi said, continuing to stare at him with the same dejected expression. Naruto just stared at Kyuubi in disbelieving shock, his jaw 10 feet under if it could have touched the ground. "Huh?" was his only response. At that, Kyuubi snorted with laughter. "Don't be so surprised, kid. Your mother and I were good friends, though I'll admit that we were at odds at times, but good friends nonetheless." Naruto continued to gaze at Kyuubi. It was unbelievable to him. After losing all of his friends, the legendary Kyuubi no Yoko informed him that it knew his mother, even though he was unaware that Kyuubi was a girl. He believed that the fox had summoned him here to brag that he was helpless because he ultimately failed to save his friends and that he couldn't kill Madara without its assistance. They used the rubbing his failures in his face tactic to depress him. Instead, the fox inquired about his emotional state and informed him that it was familiar with his mother. Indeed, who wouldn't be taken aback after that? In an attempt to gather himself, he questioned, "Why are you telling me this now? And why aren't you acting like you usually do? Normally you'd be rubbing my failures in my face by now." "The reason I'm telling you this now and why I'm not acting as I usually am is because, well, I was in a genjutsu. It only wore off when you killed that bastard Uchiha," she said with a bit of rage at the conclusion. Naruto blinked. "Okay, you got any more secrets I should probably know?" "Well, for one, I was sealed in your mother before you. I'm part of another being called the Jubi. 10 tails. I love pranks. My name is Akane. I have a human form. Oh, and while we're on that topic, I'm female." Kyuubi grinned a little at this, if it was possible. In the end, she smirked when she saw Naruto's face. The final remark caused Naruto, who had grown increasingly shocked with every revelation, to fall to the ground. Akane got right to the point by saying, "But we're off of the reason why I called you here." "Oh, and how exactly can you do that?" Naruto's eyes narrowed at the vixen as he said, "I can help you save your friends from this fate." She clarified, "I can send you back, to correct the timeline." I'm sensing that there's a catch somewhere. The fox smiled. The catch is that you would have to remove a quarter of the seal to let enough of my chakra out so I can work this jutsu, and that you could possibly develop more fox-like traits, she clarified. In the meantime, Naruto was considering his options. He could save his friends and make amends for his past transgressions, but he would need to take out a portion of the seal that secured the Kyuubi. But he had to inquire about the characteristics of the fox. Could you explain what you mean by fox-like traits? Well, your senses of smell, hearing, and sight could be enhanced, Akane clarified. After considering those, Naruto concluded that the benefits greatly outweighed the drawbacks and made his choice. He walked over to the cage and said, "Okay, let's do this." "Alright, but this will hurt. A lot." He tore off a corner of the seal and said, "I don't care if I can save my friends, then it's worth it." As soon as he tore the seal, Kyuubi's chakra surrounded him, and the next thing he knew, he was in excruciating pain. His world went dark barely a minute after he had done so because the pain was too great. Naruto opened his eyes blearily, then quickly closed them again because the sun was shining through the window. "Window?" he asked. He pondered. He opened his eyes slowly again and turned to see that the window was indeed letting in sunlight. His eyes widened as he glanced beyond it and saw the Hokage monument in the distance. He hadn't seen that since the war, when Madara and his army had destroyed it. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes and thought, that was one hell of a dream. He heard someone say, "That wasn't a dream, kid." When Naruto's head jerked up, he glanced around the room and noticed that nobody was there. Kyuubi, he reflected shakily. She laughed as she said, "Oh come on Naruto, you know my name. Kyuubi is just a title." "Wasn't that a dream? You sent us back in time, right?" he inquired. Akane exclaimed joyfully, "Yep, and if I remember right, we're back to the day off that you had before team assignments." Naruto attempted to stand up but was unable to do so and collapsed to the ground. "Why am I unable to move, Akane?" he got up to ask, but then he fell again. Akane nearly started laughing when she saw what she saw when she looked into Naruto's eyes. Every move he made gave the impression that he was an older, larger person. She tried to control her laughter and completely failed when Naruto fell face first and struck his head against his room's wall, saying, "I'd say that your muscles are trying to move like they did when you were older, instead of being the way they were when you were 13. Ha ha. When Akane suddenly stopped and there was a startled silence in the link they shared when they spoke, he thought, "Laugh it up if you don't want me to change the mindscape from a sewer to something nicer." He smirked slightly. Akane's voice was surprised as she asked, "Why you do that for me? After all that I put you through? Even if I was in a genjutsu?" In a slightly irritated tone, Naruto concluded, "Yeah, I would, and the reason I'm doing this is because you were in a genjutsu." "Alright, this is getting annoying. Pull me into the mindscape." He found it too hard to approach Akane and strike up a conversation. The answer he received was, "Alright," but then he sensed a tug in the back of his mind and followed it. The mindscape of Naruto. He was standing in front of Akane's cage. The next thing he knew, the person standing there was the only difference. The enormous fox with 9 tails was no longer there. Instead, he saw what he would call an angel because of her beauty standing in front of him, just behind the bars. She had a slightly round face with pale, unblemished skin, a small button nose, blood-red eyes with pupil slits, thin lips curled into a small smile, and lush red hair with 2 fox ears pointing out. She had a flat stomach, nice curvy hips, long, nearly endless legs, 9 red foxtails attached to her tailbone, and borderline C-cup breasts. He blushed at what he saw when he looked down past her face. Did I also mention that she was completely nude from the moment of her birth? With a blush that would turn tomatoes green with jealousy, Naruto stood motionless, just gazing at the beauty in front of him. He flew back with a geyser of blood coming out of his nose when she giggled and asked, "Like what you see, Naruto-kun?" After noticing his red and stunned face, she waited for him to get back up while giggling to herself. When he regained consciousness, he discovered Akane standing in her old attire. He turned around, blushing slightly, and said, "It's not that I don't, but could you at least put some cloths on?" She gasped a little as she looked down at herself and then exclaimed, "Oh, sorry, but it's been so long since I had to wear any clothes that I guess I forgot." She blushed and thought to herself, "I wonder if he did like what he saw though." She snapped her fingers, and some clothes appeared on her frame. "There, you can turn around now." Naruto slowly turned and sighed with relief to see that she was wearing a blue kimono with white snowflakes that nicely accentuated her figure. "Yeah, now that I'm here I was going to explain why I was changing the mindscape. The reasons why I am is for the fact that when you were in a genjutsu, so the attack wasn't your fault. 2. I need to thank you for sending us back somehow, and finally 3. I don't think that a beautiful lady like yourself would like being in a sewer. He blushed at the end. Naruto-kun thinks I'm beautiful, Akane thought, looking surprised at the last comment. Thank you for the compliment, and you're right, I don't like this sewer, she said, jokingly, but someone's mindscape represents the state that one's mind is in, so I don't think that it is possible for you to change it. In contrast, Naruto closed his eyes, smirked, and said, you do know that I'm known for doing the impossible, don't you? What do you? She trailed at the end since the surrounding area had begun to falter. It started to transform from a dark and damp sewer to a verdant forest with a lovely lake at its heart and fox pups running in a meadow next to it. She let out a gasp when she heard birds singing in the distance, saw some nesting in trees nearby, smelled the meadow's flowery sweat, and felt the breeze blowing past her. She noticed that the seal that had kept her in place had shifted, encircling her neck like a tiny choker. In the meantime, Naruto was focusing hard to create the sewer that served as his mindscape the way he desired. The gasp he heard from Akane told him it had worked. When he opened his eyes after finishing, everything was exactly as he had hoped. The next thing he knew, Akane had thrown him to the ground and was embracing him as though he were her lifeline while sobbing and muttering, "Thank you." Holding her close while he waited for her to finish, Naruto simply laughed softly. Naruto put his finger to her lips and said, "It's okay, Akane-chan. I understand that you would be excited at being someplace different from that sewer. So there is no need to apologize." She blushed after finishing and getting off of him. "Sorry that I just tackled you. I just got so excited that she said. She thought, he called me Chan, does this mean that he likes me? But Akane was frozen when she heard him add the suffix, Chan, to her name. We just met, though. As she was thinking about this, Naruto asked herself, when did I start calling her Chan? Do I already like her that way? But we just met. But when he heard Akane speak, he forced those ideas from his mind. Naruto simply sighed at her before responding, "Yeah, I guess I better get a new outfit. I never liked the thing anyway, so I guess it's time to change my look." In reality, it was the only item that the shopkeepers would sell him at a high price, but he wasn't going to ruin Akane's mood with that information. "Naruto-kun, I think that when you leave that you should get used to your younger body again, then go train to see what abilities you still have from the future and go to a ninja store to stock up on supplies and get a better outfit. Because the truth is that orange jumpsuit looks terrible and is not suitable for ninjas because it's too bright and lacks stealth." Akane sighed sorrowfully. She didn't want him to go, but she knew he had to. He got up and said, "Well, I guess I better go and get used to my body, then go and do the rest of what needs to be done." She said sadly, "Okay, but come back soon." Before vanishing from the mindscape, Naruto simply smiled and said, "Don't worry, Akane-chan. I'll visit later tonight. That's a promise." With a sorrowful sigh, Akane whispered, "Hurry back, Naruto-kun." Real world. Naruto returned to the wake world with a sigh. He attempted to stand up but collapsed on his face, saying, "Well, I guess it's time to start training. But first I've got to figure out how to work this damn body right." It took him a few attempts to get used to his smaller frame, but after about an hour he figured it out. He was now skydiving to the closest training facility to see what skills he had lost and what he had retained from the future. Until his body could handle it, or until he re-signed the Toad contract, he knew that Sage Mode was out of the question. Rasen Shuriken was also eliminated because he lacked the chakra supply needed to power the technique. He also questioned whether he would be able to keep his arm even if he succeeded because he couldn't throw it without Senjutsu, and if he used it on Kakazu the first time and broke it in his older body, it would undoubtedly sever it in his younger body. "Thank you very much." Some people would prefer to keep the limbs attached. Since Akane's chakra would alert nearby ninja, he was unable to use it. He also didn't believe that a younger body could likely handle more than one tail before going insane. And all that hard work down the drain, he thought to himself, sobbing waterfall tears, because this body had almost no chakra control at this point in time. Since he had first learned the Rasengan in this body, he could definitely use it, but only with the clone's assistance. He thought, "I can't believe that I only used it in combat once and that was before the war. Man, I really need a larger arsenal for Winjutsu." The Wind-style Rasengan was a big maybe, but on the plus side, he could throw it without Senjutsu. It was absurd to assume that his primary methods were the Rasen Shuriken, the Rasengan, and the Shadow Clone. The fact that he survived as long as he did on those is astounding. "Naruto-kun, you might have gotten another affinity when we went through time. I'm not sure, but it's probably fire since that's my element, and I sent a large amount of chakra through your body to do that." Oh, and you're at the training ground now, Akane said, laughing at the bottom of her voice. Naruto thought, thanks Akane-chan, and I'll check on that after I get my hands on some chakra paper, as his perspiration fell once more on his laps. He then looked up to see that he had reached training ground 45. It featured a vast open field, a large lake in the center, and a forest on the side. Since only Anko Mitarashi desired to approach training ground 44, also referred to as the Forest of Death, he reasoned that it would be a suitable location for training. He sighed once more, made the hand sign for his most popular jutsu, and yelled, "Shadow Clone Jutsu." Before the smoke cleared and 200 shadow clones were standing around him, he thought, yeah, my chakra control is defiantly shot to shit, I only meant to make 150. He then pulled himself together and gave orders, saying, okay, we have 1 day to get up to notch. I want you to divide into groups of 50. He waited for the clones to complete the task before continuing, you all. He pointed to the group to his right and said, have chakra control, divide it into 5 groups of 10 and have 1 group do tree walking, another water walking, the next leaf balancing, the next leaf floating, and finally, senbon balancing. He turned to the group behind him and said, the last group has the wind style. Rasengan try to make it with only 1 clone to add the wind, the other will try to handle the shape manipulation. If you can't then use the 3rd clone to, at the very least, see if it is even possible to do the technique. This group has wind manipulation, divide into 2 groups, and 1 will work on leaf cutting, the other has waterfall cutting. He pointed to the group to his left and said, dispel the best one from in the group every hour, now get to work, with a shout. Before rushing off to complete their tasks, the clones yelled, yes boss. He asked the group, and what are you all still doing here? Only 25 remained. One courageous clone said, well, there isn't any waterfall in this training ground. The clone concluded with a trembling laugh, and Naruto looked up to confirm that the training ground was indeed devoid of a waterfall. It did, however, have a sizable cluster of boulders by the lake. He had an idea after recalling Yamato's comment that if there wasn't a waterfall nearby, boulders could be cut. Well, why not use the boulders instead of a waterfall then? Asked the man. The clones responded with a feeble, yes boss. Before beginning their task of cutting boulders, their perspiration dropping at their own foolishness. After giving them a sigh, Naruto left to locate the closest ninja library. He looked up wind and fire jutsu as soon as he arrived at the jutsu section. Sitting at a table, he flipped through the book's tutorials to the main section on wind jutsu. He scanned the pages until he came across one that caught his attention. Wind style. Great breakthrough is a relatively easy technique that produces a sudden gust of wind, but the user's scale varies greatly. It has enough destructive power to topple a big tree when used by a skilled shinobi. Everything within the user's field of vision may be blown away by the squall's wind. A smaller burst of wind that ignites with flame is used in a variation of the technique. Tiger, ox, dog, hare, and snake are hand signs. With a raised eyebrow at the destructive power of the technique and the implications of the jutsu, he thought, this looks useful. After noting it down, he looked further down the page and discovered a technique that looked strong. Wind style. Petal dust dance. This technique lets the user attack their opponent by calling forth a cyclone of petals. The technique can be directed anywhere the user wants, but the user must stay in one place to use it. As a result, as a last resort, the user can maximize the technique's power and direction. His eyes widened as a memory struck him. Hawk signs are dragon, hare, and tiger. After thinking back to the mission where he first met Sora, he wrote down the technique's description and hand signals before locating the final jutsu in the book. The wind tutorials contained the majority of it. This is the technique that the body switcher used on me when we were sent on that grave robber mission. Wind style. Vacuum sphere. To use this jutsu, the user inhales deeply and then releases a series of tiny bursts of wind chakra that are spread out over a wide area, making it challenging to completely avoid them without getting hurt. The characteristics of this technique allow the ejected blasts to penetrate into and possibly through the flesh of an opponent when they collide, much like bullets do. Before Akane spoke over the link, Naruto raised an eyebrow at the description, thinking, odd, it sounds like a wind version of the Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Hand signs are rat, hare, and dog. Well, I didn't expect that, was all Naruto could say before he picked up the fire-style book. Actually, Naruto-kun, it is, but the vacuum wave came first. I should know I'm the one who made the Phoenix Flower Jutsu and then showed it to the ninja. She said, somewhat unexpectedly, instead, He read through the section on fire manipulation and discovered that it was comparable to wind manipulation. All he needed to do was superheat his chakra to burn a leaf, and if there was no nearby pond, the next step was to melt a boulder or cause a small pond to boil. As he continued reading, he read, "Warning: it is recommended that you have a water user nearby in case of fire spreading to nearby trees, flammable objects." Naruto sighed quietly to himself before turning to the book's jutsu section and discovering that the first technique was the Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Must be a popular technique then, he thought, but he sighed when he heard Akane laughing at his idea. "You are aware that I could return the mindscape to the sewer?" When he heard him stop suddenly, he smirked and asked. "You wouldn't," she said foolishly. "Try me." With a childlike exclamation, "Akane no like sewers. Akane a good girl." Akane rolled into a tiny ball and sucked her thumb, just like a 2-year-old. He said to her, "Okay, I was joking, Akane-chan, just calm down." She immediately stopped and pouted, saying, "You're no fun, Naruto-kun." Before cutting the connection, Naruto's perspiration dropped. Before reading the jutsu description, Naruto let out another sigh at her antics. Fire style. Phoenix Flower Jutsu is a technique that attacks the enemy by launching a barrage of tiny fireballs in an unpredictable manner. Additionally, it is very difficult to avoid all of the flames because they are controlled by chakra. Additionally, shuriken can be hidden inside the flames to produce a secondary surprise attack that is unexpected. Similar to the flames, chakra can be used to control the shuriken. However, this method is typically employed as a diversion. Naruto's eyes widened at the use of the jutsu, even though it wasn't exactly the same as the vacuum wave, but it was close enough. Now this would defiantly be useful, he thought, writing it down and searching for more techniques. Hand signs are rat, tiger, dog, ox, hare, and tiger. He then discovered Sasuke's most popular technique, the fireball, also known as fire style, fireball jutsu, which turns chakra that has been kneaded inside the body into fire and is released from the mouth as a continuous flamethrower or a huge orb of roaring flame. By adjusting the amount of chakra that is mustered, the attack's scope can be changed. A crater will be left on the ground's surface as the released flames devour their target. Most genin should not be able to perform this technique because it seems to require more chakra reserves than average. The hand signs for this technique are snake, tiger, monkey, boar, horse, and tiger. When he first remembered his clones, he thought, and most genin don't have the chakra reserves of Cage Ether. The good news was that he could still perform the Rasengan with the clone's assistance in the wind style, which allowed him to throw it with just one clone. The bad news was that groups that worked on chakra control and wind manipulation hadn't advanced very far. The control groups were able to climb the tree and walk on the water, but the leaf balancers and floaters still needed some practice. They could cut half the leaf and a quarter of the boulders, but not much more. The damn needles kept flying off in different directions, and neither could the senbon balancers. As he jotted down the technique, he thought, well, one more jutsu and then to the shopping. He discovered a really effective technique in the book. He quickly skimmed the description, grinned, wrote it down, folded the paper, put it in his pocket, and departed for the one store he knew would serve him. Standing outside the 10 Points weapon store, Naruto grinned. Tenten and her family owned a small store. Despite its diminutive appearance, it was enormous inside. There were shelves upon shelves of swords, ninja wire, shuriken, kunai, and pretty much any other type of bladed weapon you could imagine inside the walls. The entire store was covered in enlargement seals, though few people knew this and even fewer survived to tell. Naruto was aware of this because Tenten had told him in private the first time he entered and then threatened to castrate him if he ever told anyone. Naruto, of course, had sworn never to tell anyone. Thank you, but he would prefer to keep his man bits. He recalled his first encounter with the 3-member family as he stood there. For what seemed like the 1000th time, he had fled for his life and hid behind the store to avoid the crowd. Tenten's father had come to look into the noise he had heard. He discovered a 5-year-old Naruto Uzumaki, skin and bones, starving, and dressed in tattered, filthy clothing that wasn't even fit for rags. He had taken pity on him and provided him with food and overnight shelter. That evening, he also met Tenten, who ended up becoming his first and best friend. They pretended to be strangers based solely on appearance. The most painful thing for him was witnessing Madara murder her. The thought of it still shattered his heart. As soon as the second group of clones dispelled their knowledge, he jolted out of his now painful thoughts. The clones could now balance a leaf on their hands and forearms, but nowhere else, thanks to his improved chakra control. The senbon balance was also better, allowing the clones to balance a needle on 3 fingers. The Rasengan took longer to perform one-handed than with a clone, but it was getting better. The wind manipulation was also going well. They had advanced to the boulders, which could now be cut halfway through, and were able to use their chakra to cut the leaves all the way through. He sighed as he entered the 10 points and realized right away that something was amiss. It was dead silent in the shop. You could have heard a pin drop, but nothing moved. It made him uneasy. When a hand was firmly placed on his shoulder, he nearly leapt out of his skin. Slowly turning, he discovered that the hand belonged to Tenten. Naruto claimed to have seen the Shinigami hovering over the girl, who was surrounded by an aurora of death. He gulped and stammered, "Hi-T Tenten," as he greeted her. The next thing he knew, she had swept him into the storage room, strapped him up, and sealed the door to silence him. "You," she said, gesturing to him. "Have some explaining to do, and if I'm not satisfied with your answer I will castrate you with a dull and rusty kunai," he said. "Got that?" His eyes widened. He nodded more quickly than he had ever done in his life. "Now care to explain why one moment I'm watching your fight against Madara?" His eyes widened. She frowned as she concluded, "And the next I'm waking up and I'm 14 again." Naruto would be rolling on the ground if his eyes could get any bigger. "How is this even possible, Akane-chan? How could she possibly accompany me back?" Desperately trying to make sense of the situation, he asked. "I don't know, Naruto-kun. The only thing that I can think of is that she was the closest one to you when my chakra surged through you and she got caught in the jutsu with you," she murmured. He attempted to play it off as "I don't know what you're talking about and you just grabbed me, and you tied me up for no reason." Moment. Tenten, I don't know what you're talking about." Tenten yelled, "Don't play with me, Naruto, I know you had something to do with this. I saw you at Training Ground 45 ordering your clones to do chakra control, wind manipulation, the Rasengan and its wind variants. If that isn't enough, I know you didn't know the secret to the shadow clone until you started wind manipulation." She grinned knowing that she had him at that. Knowing that she had him, Naruto sighed and asked, "Okay, you got me. What is it you want to know?" She smiled and said, "Everything." He then described how Madara had killed everyone, how he had gone crazy and destroyed himself after meeting the real Kyuubi, and how he had reverted to the past. "And I guess you being the nearest me when I collapsed got wrapped in Akane-chan's chakra." Summarized everything up to this point. Tenten looked thoughtfully at her chin as she took in what she had just heard. Naruto nodded and said, "So let me get this straight, Madara killed us all." He nodded once more. "You lost control of the Kyuubi's chakra," he said. "Destroyed every inch of him with a massive Rasen Shuriken," nodding. "Then you collapsed and ended up in your mindscape and met the Kyuubi, who by the way is a female and is named Akane, found out that she was under a genjutsu and that she knew your mother," a second nod. "She then sent her chakra through you to turn back the clock 5 years, with a second nod, and me being the closest to you when you collapsed ended up getting wrapped up in the chakra to do said time travel." A second nod. "And then you found that Kyuubi's human form is a smoking hot vixen woman," with another nod. "And you have feelings for her." He blushed and nodded, then asked, "What?" "You can't fool me, Naru-kun, I saw the blush you had when you were talking about Akane-san." She grinned. Naruto exclaimed, Is it really that obvious?" Tenten sighed and said, "Yeah it is," before asking an absolutely mind-blowing question. "Can I meet her?" Huh? He stammered, his eyes wide. With puppy dog eyes and her lower lip pouting at him, she said, "Oh come on Naruto-kun, how many people can say that they've met the strongest being on the planet who just so happens to be a female? So can I meet her? Please, with a cherry on top." He tried desperately to avoid her gaze, thinking, "I must resist the look. But it's so cute, no I must resist the look." Prior to Tenten adding tears to her eyes, he was achieving some success. Not the teary eyes, please. As his defenses weakened and he gave in, he thought, "I'm crying anime tears." He uttered in agony, "All right, just untie me first. These ropes are a little tight." She undid the ropes and said, "Oh sorry," with a sheepish smile. Tenten grinned brightly when Naruto got up after she had untied them. "But not here. Walk with me to Training Ground 45 after I've restocked my supplies and gotten a better outfit, then I'll let you meet her, okay?" he said, observing her expression change in a matter of seconds from joyful to dangerous to thoughtful. "That's probably the best I'm going to get, isn't it?" she asked, letting out a sigh. Naruto grinned as he said, "Pretty much yeah." Tenten ripped the silencing seal off the door and let him out, saying with a menacing expression, "Oh all right. Just hurry up." He hurriedly exclaimed, "Okay," and jumped out of the closet, grabbing 5 sets of shuriken and 4 sets of kunai before turning and going to the clothes section. He went to the changing room after grabbing some that piqued his interest. After placing his gear on the bench next to them, he went inside and put on his new attire. When Tenten saw Naruto in his new attire, she exclaimed, "Wow!" Her face was flushed, and blood was streaming from her nose. He was dressed in a skin-tight fishnet shirt that displayed his growing muscles and six-pack abs, black Anbo-style pants that ended at the mid-calf and had tape running from the stop to his feet, which were in black shinobi sandals, fingerless gloves with a metal plate on them, like Kakashi's, and a black headband that matched his Shippuden one. Her thoughts descended into perverted territory as she got a better look at him. Even Akane, who had been a flushed mess after hearing Naruto's partial admission of feelings for her, was struggling to control her thoughts and blush in response to Naruto's new appearance. Wait, am I really that fond of him? She questioned herself. Naruto approached Tenten and waved his hand in front of her face while she struggled with her inner demons. He snapped his fingers in front of Tenten's face and said, "Hello, Konoha to Tenten, are you there?" "Huh?" she asked, emerging from her reverie and blushing even more at the sight of Naruto's proximity to her. His eyes were filled with concern as he said, "I asked if you okay?" The words, "Oh why yeah I'm fine," came out softly. "Good," he said, smiling and leaning back, before becoming a little anxious. "Well, Tenten, where do you keep the chakra paper? Akane mentioned that I might have gained a secondary element, and I check if I did," he said as he rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly, conjuring up an image in Tenten's mind that made her squeal. Kawaii. Tenten walked back into the storage room after managing to gather herself enough strength to respond, albeit a little shakily, "I was just about to get them when you walked in." With a sigh, Naruto returned outside carrying 2 packages of chakra paper, which are sold in packs in this story, which she then put on an empty shelf nearby, leaving one for him and one for her. Naruto was about to inquire after noticing the extra pack out when she provided the answer. "What, can't I train in my elements too? I mean, if you gained another affinity I could have too, you know." She is right, Naru-kun, she could have also gained a secondary element, but it would probably be weaker than yours seeing as she wasn't the target for the jutsu, Akane stated via the link. Tenten was thrilled when Naruto said, "I guess we might as well see if you did then, Tenten. Akane-chan says that it's a possibility." Her eyes widened, and she sighed before quietly saying, "Alright, let me just ring this up and then we'll be on our way." She then walked over to behind the register and rang up his total. "Alright. Your total is 747 yen and 39 sen. I just wrote down a figure because I have no idea how much that actually is." Naruto sighed as he paid for his acquisition. When another group of clones dispersed, he stopped suddenly and gripped his head in agony, saying, "Okay, let's go now, it's starting to get late." Tenten hurried to her friend's side after noticing his condition and worriedly inquired, "You okay?" Before muttering something that Tenten thought sounded like, "Stupid clones and their pranks," Naruto said, "Yeah, I'm fine, just too many clones dispelling at once is all." When asked about it, Tenten giggled and responded, "Nothing, just thought of something funny," with barely contained giggles. Tenten turned to face the back of the store and yelled, "Dad, I'm going out for a bit." He got a muffled, "Okay." They left after saying that, "Grounds for training." Naruto said, "Okay, we're here," as he entered the training area. Tenten whistled as she observed the shadow clones continuing their honorable training, saying, "That's not as many as I've seen you make, but it's still impressive." Naruto started off smirking but ended up looking serious as he and Tenten pulled out a slip of chakra paper. "You should have seen it before the last 3 groups dispelled. Now we're here for a reason, aren't we?" "You go first, Naruto." "I know what they do, but I've never seen it before except with my earth nature," Tenten replied. Pushing his chakra into it, Naruto nodded. The fact that one half of the paper was burned to a crisp and the other half split was somewhat unexpected. It was unexpected that the final one broke in 2, with the top part crinkling into a tiny ball and the bottom becoming so mushy. "Akane-chan, how come I have 4 affinities? How is that possible? I expected the wind and fire but not the lightning and water." After saying or asking, he turned to Tenten and then Akane. Incredulous, Tenten uttered, "I don't know." Akane spoke more to herself than to Naruto, but he could still hear her say, "I thought that this might happen." "What do you mean?" She sighed to herself and started to explain. She concluded, "What I meant was that I thought your chakra reserve would increase to the point that you would get your parents' affinities, as your mother had water and your father had lightning. So the fact that my chakra control is shot," she said, "means that my reserve increased and not that my body has none at this time?" he inquired. She giggled and said, "Not entirely, but mostly it's the fact that at the moment your chakra control sucks." Naruto's eyebrow began to twitch in frustration as a vein appeared on his head. He turned to Tenten for an explanation after taking a deep breath to calm himself. He murmured to himself, Akane-chan says that the reason I have 4 natures instead of 2 is that my reserves increased so much that I gained both my parents' natures, mom being water, dad the lightning. She said, right, in awe, and then something clicked. Hey Naruto-kun, could have happened to me? She asked with his eyes widening. Before you ask, yes, it's possible, slim, but possible, and that her chakra reserves could now rival yours when you were this age, now not counting, Akane responded. Akane-chan says that it is slim but not impossible and that your reserves could rival mine when I was originally 13. That was close to cage level, so looks like you got some control training to do. Naruto replied with a smirk that made her. She nodded as Naruto said, well, we'll worry about that later. Let's take a look. He then pushed chakra into the paper. Another surprise occurred when it split in 2, with one half crumbling and the other splitting again, one part becoming soggy and the other burning to ashes. Okay, so that's earth, fire, wind, and water. My dad has water. Akane gave me fire. Earth was my original, and I'm guessing that my mom gave me wind. It looks like your earth and wind are strongest though, seeing as the wind happened twice and there's nothing left of the earth but dust, said Naruto. When he thought, if her reserves are large enough, what's stopping me from? He started to think aloud. Tenten was interrupted. What was that? Tenten immediately mirrored his broad smile as he explained, I was just thinking that since your reserves are large enough I could teach you the shadow clone jutsu. She practically demanded that Naruto-kun teach her how to make the shadow clone, saying that it would make training much simpler. With a resolute fire in his eyes, Naruto declared, I was going to anyway, Tenten-chan. Since we're in this together, we need to get as strong as we can, as fast as we can. Because I am not letting you all die again. But when Tenten heard the suffix added to her name, she blushed. Naruto didn't notice this, but Akane did, asking, since when he called me, her Tenten-chan? Both of them thought, one blushing and the other growling a little. Naturally, Naruto was as unaware as ever. With a voice that could melt ice, Akane said, Naruto-kun, please let's get on with the lesson. With anxiety, he thought, why yes, Akane-chan. She was startled out of her reverie by his words. Right, listen carefully, Tenten. He began to describe the jutsu and how it operates. After an hour he concluded by saying, so that's how the shadow clone jutsu works. He turned to see Tenten's mouth hanging open and her eyes wide. Her stunned expression was broken when she heard the words, you know if you don't close your mouth you'll catch flies in it. That was surprising, Naruto-kun. You actually went into detail and explained things that even I didn't know about the jutsu. How'd you find all that out? She inquired. You know how I graduated, don't you? Snorted Naruto. He posed a rhetorical question. With sheepishness, she said, oh right, sorry. It's all right, besides you know I'm smarter than I look. I know, she sighed sorrowfully, recalling their first encounter. How about trying out the jutsu now? He inquired. Yes. She pounded her fist into her open hand as she spoke. She yelled, Shadow Clone Jutsu, while inserting her hand into the cross seal. All they could do was climb stairs after the many smoke puffs subsided. This was unexpected. This was unexpected, Naruto uttered in shock as he gazed at the 150 Tentens that were gathered in the field. No shit, Sherlock. One of the Naruto clones who had halted training to watch the events said, growing a tick mark. Naruto hit it over the head and dispelled it, gaining its knowledge. Tenten, who had been staring at her copies, jolted out of her reverie at the sound of the clone dispelling and said, I made this many and don't even feel winded. Yeah, your reserves are defiantly rivaling mine when I was originally 13. Naruto laughed, then became serious, saying, now it's my turn. He put his hands in his favorite seal, Shadow Clone. I'm making 100 of my own, he yelled. Listen up. All of the clones, including Tenten's, imitated the clone's shout as it snapped into a salute. Naruto began giving orders while sweating over their clones' antics. All right, everyone, we have a lot of training to do and a short time to do it in. After waiting for them to do so, he began. I need you all to split up into groups of 25 each and pair up with a group of Tenten's clones. Group 1. He indicated the cluster of clone pairs on the left. Pointing to the group in front, he said, Group 2 will start with the wind jutsus that we picked up earlier. He then turned to the group on the right and said, Group 3 will start on fire manipulation. He then turned to the group behind them and said, Group 4 will work on the fire jutsus. He then turned to one of the groups of Tenten's clones and said, Group 5 will work on Tenten's earth manipulation. Finally, he pointed to the final group of 25 Tenten, saying, and Group 6 will work on chakra control, starting with the basics and then move to the more difficult ones. Is there anything you would like to add, Ten-chan? He asked Tenten. Getting herself together, she said, not that I can think of, but keep the instructions simple for my clones, and to those working on Earth manipulation you know what to do, so no slacking off. She said this to Naruto first, then to his clones, and finally to her clones, all of whom nodded. Naruto then addressed all of the clones, saying, now, get to work. Yes, boss. He yelled, receiving a shout in return. Before everyone started working on their assignments. How much chakra do you have left? He asked, turning back to Tenten. That wasn't even half my new reserve, she replied with a sly smile. Good, then make one more clone. He said, creating another copy of himself. She raised an eyebrow at this, but she still complied. All right, he said, turning to face the two clones. You two are going to the library to look over the fundamentals of manipulating water and lightning. Next, look for ninjutsu. Right, make your own copy, then return to refute it. Have you got all that? Before they left, Tenten's clone gave him a straightforward, yes. Before he finished, yes boss. Tenten was staring at Naruto with wide eyes. What's on my face? He smiled as he asked. And no, it's just that I didn't know that you could be so commanding, she replied, her cheeks slightly flushed. After Tenten had sat next to him, Naruto sighed quietly and motioned to Tenten to follow suit. So how do I bring someone into my mindscape with me, Akane-chan? He asked over their link after Tenten had done so. After a moment of reflection, Akane recalled how Kushina had once brought Minato into her mindscape when Minato, wanted to meet her. Akane. If I remember this right, you should join hands and put your foreheads together and let me do the rest, Kushina explained. The mindscape of Naruto. The first thing Tenten saw when she opened her eyes was that she was in a forest clearing surrounded by a lake, meadows, and various wild animals, but mostly foxes. Her eyes widened when she turned to face Naruto, who appeared to have missed his previous visit because he was in his older form. Tenten was staring at him with wide eyes when he opened his eyes. Okay, what now? He sighed and said, why, you're in your older F form, to which she stammered. Naruto's eyes widened, and then he saw that Tenten was in hers as well. So are you? He said, startled. So, Naruto-kun, you finally noticed? Said a voice off to their right. Looking over to the voice, they found Akane sitting against a tree smirking at them. Noticed what? Confused, Naruto asked. She sighed at his inattention and said, that since we've come back, that whenever you come to the mindscape you're in your older body. Their eyes widened even more at this point, and Tenten stammered, bringing Akane's attention to herself. So this is the other one that likes Naruto, Akane thought, but on the outside she replied with a strained smile. The reason why you both are in your older forms is that your minds mature at a faster rate than your bodies, so when we returned, she said, her eyes narrowed. Your mind was more suited to your older form than it was to your younger one, which is why you had trouble moving this morning, Naruto-kun. That caused them to exchange understanding glances. She snapped her fingers and said, now, if you don't mind, Naruto-kun, I think Tenten-san and I need to talk. She and Tenten disappeared in a tiny pop. Okay. That was strange, Naruto remarked, his face bewildered. A distinct area of Naruto's mind. Akane's hands on her hips and a frown on her face stood in front of Tenten, who was perplexed because one moment she was sitting in front of Naruto when Akane snapped her fingers, and the next she was in a completely different place. To skip the description, it's the place Minato took Naruto to talk when Naruto had released his eight-tailed form. Okay, what was it you wanted to talk about? She asked apprehensively. Tenten's eyes widened at her as she practically demanded, I want to know what your intentions for Naruto-kun are. She understood what she was saying, but she tried to act as though she didn't understand. What do you? Don't play with me, girl. I've seen how you look at him when he's not looking. I'm all for sharing, but I will not allow anyone to be with him if they intend to do him harm. She said, then widened her eyes at her own mistake. In a single statement, she had essentially acknowledged that she had feelings for Naruto and that she didn't mind sharing him either. Tenten, meanwhile, was simultaneously delighted and wide-eyed in surprise. I'm shocked that the Kyuubi felt that way about Naruto, but I'm glad she was willing to share him. Indeed, she had long since come to terms with her feelings for Naruto. She hadn't immediately noticed it during his 3-year trip, but she had been missing him and thinking about him a lot. In fact, she went to the village gate every day to check on him, and it had been painful to be away from the village when he returned. However, she barely controlled the urge to take him right away when she saw him on the Gaia, Gara, retrieval mission. Her heart nearly burst out of her chest, and she nearly couldn't contain her blush when she saw how hot he had grown. She snapped out of her reverie, blushing at the place where her thoughts had gone, and noticed that Akane had been observing her closely. "Don't worry, I don't intend to hurt him in any way, shape, or form," she replied. Tenten blushed but nearly squealed with delight as she said, "Good, then we won't have a problem, and you don't need to worry, Naruto likes you too." Yes, there were advantages to having access to her host's thoughts. Akane smiled perversely and said, "But I get him first." Tenten sulked, "Oh come on. You're no fun." Akane gave her a sly smile before her face changed to one of thoughtfulness. "Now the only problem is how to make him ours," she said aloud before a thought suddenly occurred to her. She developed a cunning expression. "I think I'm gonna like the idea you have if the look on your face is to go by," Tenten replied. Tenten simply grinned at this. "Oh, you will, but in order for this to work we're going to need at least one more girl, 2 tops. I really wouldn't mind that. I mean, I've seen some of the other girls that like Naruto-kun, and trust me when I say I wouldn't mind sharing him, especially with that Suna Kunoichi Gaia. Besides, with the way his life has been, Naruto needs all the love he can get." She replied with an arrogant grin. Yes, Tenten had a slight crush on Gaia and was secretly bi. Even though Naruto Uzumaki was the only person she would ever love and give herself to, she still looked at and enjoyed the beauty of the female body. Akane turned serious after blushing at the implications of Tenten's words. They talked about their strategy and agreed that they would act when the time was right. They nodded and grinned evilly at each other before Akane snapped her fingers and they were back with Naruto. The primary component of the mindscape. Before he heard the 2 girls reappear, Naruto had been bored for almost an hour while he had been sitting in the same spot. He turned to face them, saw their smiles, and swallowed uneasily. Those looks didn't sit well with him. He stammered a, "So how'd it go?" Akane smiled and asked, "Very good, wouldn't you say, Ten-chan?" Tenten grinned and added, "Oh yes, very, very good, Akane-chan." Naruto said, "Anything I need to know?" Tenten said, "All in due time, Naru-kun." He sighed, "I see. We need to get back to training, Tenten." She turned to face Akane and said, "Yeah, I guess you're right." She winked and blushed slightly as she said, "Well, Akane-chan, it was nice meeting you and thank you for, you know." With a broad smile, Akane pushed them out of the seal and said, "Yes, nice meeting you and you are very welcome." Away from the mindscape, Naruto frowned slightly and remarked, "Well, now that that's over with, we might as well start the physical training." The shadow clones were capable of many things, but they were unable to transfer physical abilities. Make use of the original's physical capabilities? Indeed. New transfer? No. She trailed off slowly at the end when she noticed Naruto's eyes gradually widening. "Yeah, I guess, but they should have invented a seal to go with this jutsu." Naruto had a thought when Tenten said that. Would he be able to create a seal that would convert the transference of knowledge into a physical transference? The answer was both straightforward and challenging because creating the actual seal would require more skill than he currently possessed. He wasn't an Uzumaki for nothing, though. "Tenten, I could just kiss you," Naruto yelled as he leapt to his feet, seized her, and embraced her before he began to jump wildly up and down. Akane merely grinned, while Tenten blushed and smiled slightly. "This is her opportunity," as Tenten slammed her lips against Naruto's and placed her arms on his shoulders to prevent him from jumping, they both thought. When Naruto felt her lips on his eyes grew wide. He was being kissed by Tenten. It was unbelievable to him. Although he had liked her for some time prior to the time jump, he had never anticipated this. He knew he liked Akane too, but he was now perplexed and unsure of what to do. His mind was telling him to shut up and enjoy it, while another part was telling him that this was wrong and that he should stop. Since Naruto is Naruto, he followed his gut when it told him to stop talking and have fun. He leaned into it, then. Instead of pushing her away as Tenten had anticipated, Naruto leaned in and began moving his lips in time with hers, surprising her. She was kissing the boy. No, man, of her dreams, and she felt like she was in heaven. In an attempt to escalate the situation, Naruto opened his mouth and licked her bottom lip, requesting entry. When Tenten felt Naruto's tongue brush against her bottom lip, she was even more shocked and happily allowed him inside. Tenten was surprised to discover that Naruto's mouth tasted more like oranges and grapes than ramen, as she had anticipated, during a battle of the tongs. It tasted like cherries to Naruto Tenten's mouth. Tenten groaned and withdrew, causing Naruto to groan in disappointment. That was my first kiss," she said, rather shakily. This caused Naruto's eyes to widen. He blushed brightly and said, "It was mine too." The kiss with Sasuke never took place. Tenten glanced down before realizing where they were. She had her hands on either side of Naruto's head and appeared to have straddled his waist in some way. When Naruto noticed their location, he turned to the side to see that their clones had gathered to watch the performance. He said, Tenten? As he looked back up at her. Yeah? Naruto pointed to the assembled clones and said, it looks like we have an audience. She turned to face the clones, who appeared to recognize her presence and hastily returned to their duties. You Tenten, see, could you get up? Not that I don't love to have a beautiful woman such as yourself on top of me, but this could cause unwanted problems if someone were to see us like this. Naruto laughed sheepishly. Tenten, blushing at the compliment, sighed but did as she was told. Nervously, unsure of what to do after everything, Naruto asked, so, what does this make us now? Tenten smirked as she leaned in and whispered softly into his ear, just to let you know I don't mind sharing, and neither does she. Naruto's eyes widened for what seemed like the 100th time today, and he asked himself, Akane-chan, is this true? After a brief period of silence, Akane mutely said, yes, Naru-kun, it is. Does this imply that you also wish to be with me? Why yes. Was her timid stutter. Naruto was shocked to learn that he had not only one, but two extremely attractive girlfriends in a single day. With a megawatt smile on his face and an overloaded brain, he naturally did the only thing he could in this circumstance. He fainted. Later that evening, despite the physical torture he inflicted on them that day, Naruto couldn't stop grinning after he regained consciousness. Every time they looked at one another, they both had that shit-eating smile. It appeared that the clones they had created in order to visit the library had decided to dispel their jutsu lists at home. Since wind was the rarest element and there weren't many people using it in Konoha, there didn't seem to be many wind jutsu, even though the lists of lightning, water, and more fire jutsu seemed interesting to them both. Ultimately, they could claim to be at least half as proficient as they were prior to the war. Naruto is even more proficient in several jutsu now than he was before, but they would need to remember to ask Temari or Gaia for some wind jutsu after the invasion was over. The invasion, which had caused the majority of Naruto's suffering, along with losing his Jiji, Sasuke's betrayal, and finally finishing his Nindo, caused his face to darken. He had a lot of things to stop, including Sasuke receiving the cursed seal, Jiji passing away, and, now that he thinks about it, Kakashi's partiality, which, along with witnessing Naruto's strength increase, had pushed Sasuke over the edge. Overall, he and Tenten had a lot of training and hard work ahead of them. After a passionate makeout session and a vow to meet up the following day, Tenten had left Naruto after he had walked her home to the 10 points, hand in hand, before entering with a slight flush. His final thoughts before turning in for the night were that it had been a very productive day overall. Naruto was in a great mood when he woke up until he realized that today was team assignment day. His mood soured even more as he reflected on the events of the first time. With reference to his two future teammates, Akane remarked, calm down Naru-kun, they'll get what's coming to them. Yes, I suppose. When he arrived, he walked straight up to her and pulled her down into a kiss that swiftly escalated into a furious tongue duel. Hey, pull me in for a minute, Akane-chan. She raised an eyebrow, but complied. He withdrew from a startled and flushed Akane after a few minutes, asking, what was that for? Breathlessly, she asked. Why am I unable to give one of my girlfriends a kiss? He smiled as he asked. No. In order to calm her, he put a figure to her lips and laughed, leaving her a stuttering mess. He whispered, I was kidding, don't take it so seriously, Akane-chan. She pouted at him, blushing even more, saying, you're no fun, Naru-kun. She smirked as she turned away from him and said, I won't give you the surprise that could solve your Rasen Shuriken problem just for that. Why, you found a way around the Rasen Shuriken? Naruto asked, his eyes widening. He shakily asked. Yep. With her back to him, she said, but since you felt the need to make fun of me, I won't tell you. Please, Akane-chan, tell me, Naruto said, lowering himself to his knees and clasping his hands in front of his chest. She turned to him, quirking and raising an eyebrow. I'll do anything you ask. Anything? She inquired. Yes, anything, he repeated, his face beseeching. His eyes widened before he pulled her down to him, took her lips in his, and gave her another passionate kiss. Maybe if you, she said, bending down to whisper in his ear, kiss me again. After pulling back, he said with a slight smile, you know if you wanted another kiss all you had to do was ask. Akane grinned and said, I know but I had to pay you back somehow after that. Akane-chan. Naruto started slowly, Did you really mean what you said about finding a way around my Rasen Shuriken problem? She asked, showing that she was paying attention. He asked with a hint of excitement. She grinned broadly and replied, yeah, I did. What is it? After a moment of contemplation, Akane said, you are aware that using Sage Mode requires a summoning contract, correct? What if I told you that a particular clan of summons had the same thing? Naruto nodded. He raised a trembling finger at her and said, why you mean that there's a Fox clan and that they have Sage Mode? His eyes almost burst out of his head. And that I was the boss of said clan. Yes, there is, he said in a voice that was just as shaken. Senjutsu is one of the techniques that the Toads shared with us, and they are actually our close allies, she concluded with a smirk. The next thing she knew was that Naruto had thrown her to the ground and was kissing her face while saying, thank you. He quickly got up and pulled Akane with him, saying sheepishly, sorry. With control, he realized what he was doing. Don't worry, Naruto-kun. She laughed and said, I get it. Are you ready to sign it, then? Yes, you could resign the Toad contract too, she said, rolling her eyes before catching a glimpse of his hesitation. How would that be possible? She asked. I believe that a person could only be under one contract, he asked, perplexed. Typically, they could only have one because summonings are so infrequent. The blonde's stunned expression gradually changed from stunned to a small smile, then to a shit-eating grin that could have been seen from space, as Akane explained to a now shocked Naruto, but if one were to have two allied contracts and they agree to have the same summoner, then it is possible to have more than one contract, and since I'm the boss of the Fox clan and I agree you could defiantly have the Toad summons again. Naruto knelt down and gathered her hands in his, saying, have I ever expressed my love for you, Akane-chan? No, I don't think that you have. Akane raised an eyebrow, his face flushed as if he were a tomato. I haven't? In a playful tone, he said, well, I'll just have to correct that mistake by saying it every day until I am worthy of your love. But getting back to business. Yes, I will sign the contract for the Fox clan. He returned to his serious tone. You sign it much more skillfully than Naruto, so I doubt I need to explain that part. However, this contract has a different seal sequence than the standard one. Akane clarified this by controlling her blush and using a tail flick to call the contract to her side. An alternative seal sequence? Naruto inquired. Yes. I'm not even sure why. However, I assume that's because each tailed beast has a summoning clan, and their contracts have different seal sequences. Unbeknownst to the beasts themselves, the Sage of Six Paths had actually determined that the hand seals for the summoning clans of the tailed beasts should differ from the standard contracts. Akane handed Naruto the big scroll and said, now sign the contract and I'll tell you the hand signs. He would be the first Fox summoner, Naruto realized when he unrolled it. He signed it by biting his thumb until it bled, then pressing his still bleeding thumb to each of his other fingers to leave an imprint of each finger on the contract. She smiled proudly and said, congratulations, Naruto-kun, you are now the first summoner of the Fox clan. She showed him the final seal, which resembled the dragon seal except that the ring fingers were straight, the tips touching, and the thumbs apart. Now the hand signs are dog, horse, ox, tiger, and fox. As an idea occurred to him, Naruto nodded to her and said, hey, Akane-chan, is there any chance Ten-chan could sign it as well? Yes, it would. Actually, I hoped you would inquire, because I would be more than pleased to accept her as my clan's second summoner if she did wish to sign, she said. As Naruto was about to say something, Akane, who was aware of the time, pushed him out of the mindscape and said, Naruto-kun, I'm sorry, but you need to get to the academy. You've been in here so long that you barely have time to get ready. Away from the mindscape, when Naruto woke up and realized he was still in bed, he glanced at the clock and realized he had barely 20 minutes to get there. He jumped out of bed, rushed to the bathroom, stripped off his nightgown, took a quick shower, changed into his new clothes he had gotten the day before, and left. On his way, he noticed Tenten strolling with her team. Guy was absent due to teamwork, so he hurried past them, barely catching a glimpse of them. What was that? Through the smoke, Neji Hyuga, the team's resident conceited jerk and ardent believer in fate, coughed. I'm not sure, but that person's youthful passion is blazing brightly. I'll run around the village 100 times on my hands if I can't match them, and if I can't, Tenten's fist struck Lee's head, cutting him off. Jeez, Lee, that's sufficient. I'm so going to get you for that, Naru-kun. All that just to hand me a note? She exclaimed, irritated by his enthusiasm. She slipped her hand into her pocket, where the note was at the moment. A new record. That's 5 minutes faster than the last time. Naruto, on the other hand, had just arrived at the academy with 5 minutes to spare. He smirked as he entered the classroom, realizing that he was among the last to arrive. He nearly froze when he saw all of his friends again, but he had been ready for the shock of seeing them, even though it still hurt. This time, he would save his friends who were still naive to the world around them and didn't understand what it meant to be a shinobi. Using the link, he sat down at the back of the class and asked Akane, "So Akane-chan, anything I should know about the Fox Sage mode?" She took a moment to collect herself before explaining that the Fox Sage mode is in essence the same as the Toad's with a few minor differences. Such as, for example, a vertical slit is used in place of the bar-like pupil. Additionally, rather than being orange, the pigment surrounding the eyes is a deeper shade of red. However, you should be able to alternate between the two styles, possibly even combining them, once you regain the Toad contract. 1. That's why I gave you the contract, Naruto-kun. We need you as strong as we can get you in Sage mode is a big advantage. Akane explained her reasoning for the contract, adding that, and I think that it's time that the foxes finally had a summoner. His eyes glazed over as he processed all the information. So I'd be able to throw the Rasen Shuriken again, thus losing the risk to my arm. That could really come in handy, especially against Orochimaru, he thought. Naruto was about to respond when he heard a rumbling and realized what it meant. The fangirls are coming. He was glad he didn't have any at the moment, because yes, he had had a fan club following the pain attack, and it wasn't fun. He could honestly say that was the only thing he had never envied Sasuke for, and he thought fan clubs were pointless justifications for Kunoichi, with the exception of Ino, who took her training seriously. Imo, who had been sitting quietly in his corner, brooding, ignored the tidal wave of Sasuke's fangirls as the door exploded open. Iruka Amino, the class teacher, entered the room shortly after a fight broke out over who would sit next to the Imo. The Chunin looked around the room and fell to his knees, saying, "Good morning class, please take a seat." He grew a tick mark before grinning and making the hand signal. I said, "Shut up and take a seat." The class ignored him. He used his patented, demon-headed jutsu, which caused his head to enlarge to twice its normal size, to command the class, mostly the quarreling fangirls, to stop arguing and follow his instructions. I can begin working on the team placements now that that is finished. When it came to the ones he remembered, Team 7 is Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno. Naruto ignored the unimportant ones that he knew wouldn't pass their actual graduation tests. "Ha told you pig he's mine," was erupted. The Banshee screamed even louder, and Naruto Uzumaki, once more. "What?" However, Naruto Baka failed his graduation exam. Iruka-sensei. She spoke with a mix of incredulity and rage. "I did pass, in fact." From his corner in the back of the room, Naruto said, "It appears that I have too much chakra to control for the normal clone jutsu, so the Hokage gave me a more chakra-consuming clone technique, which I was easily able to perform." Sakura screamed and leapt up to punch him, saying, "Yeah right Baka, stop lying and get out of here. We may be teammates, and I may be willing to work with you, Sakura-san, but your days of abusing me are over," Naruto said, avoiding it and grabbing her arm before twisting it behind her back and pinning her against the wall. "Why should I allow you to continue when I never liked you in the first place?" A voice above them said, "And as for me lying about having too much chakra, it's true as I have never been able to perform the regular clone technique, and the one you just tried to punch is a copy of me." Naruto's icy tone sent chills down the spines of the class. When the class looked up, they saw Naruto sitting upside down on the roof, with most of the guys muttering, "Show off," and the girls blushing at his new appearance. "Sakura-san, you can see that he is speaking the truth. Would you please tell your clone to let Naruto go?" Iruka, who had known the real Naruto had been there the entire time, asked calmly, almost missing him. After a moment of staring at the terrified Chunin, Naruto turned to face his clone, who nodded and blew out a poof. Team 8, which consists of Shino Aburame, Kiba Inuzuka, and Hinata Hyuga, has eliminated the distraction. Ino Yamanaka, Shoji Akamichi, and Shikamaru Nara make up Team 10 because Team 9 from the previous year is still in use. Use the hour before your senseis arrive to have lunch and get to know your teammates. Iruka concluded before leaving the room, saying, "And I would like to congratulate you all for making it this far in your careers." After attracting everyone's attention with his leap from the roof, Naruto turned to face the rest of the room and said, "I don't know about you all, but I've got someone to meet for lunch, so see you all in an hour," before leaving through the door. As he waited for Kakashi to arrive, Naruto sighed and said, "Remind me to do something about his tardy problem." He said this to no one in particular, but Akane replied, "Will do Naruto-kun." However, she felt that the books were demeaning to women everywhere, so she said, I don't see why you didn't threaten those disgusting Icha books of his. Maybe that could straighten him out. When Naruto's head struck the top of the table he was setting, his two teammates turned to face him and asked, "What's up, Baka?" Sakura inquired, irritated by having to wait for Naruto's antics in addition to their sensei. Akane laughed at Naruto's foolishness as he scolded himself, saying, "I'm such an idiot for not thinking about that last time." She received no response. He was about to respond when the door opened and a head with spiked gray hair, a headband, and a lazy expression in the one eye visible emerged. Kakashi simply gazed at his team of genin. Before vanishing in a puff of smoke and a flurry of leaves, he remarked, "My first impression of you all is, I hate you. Now meet me on the roof in 5 minutes." Before vanishing in a puff of smoke that indicated he was a shadow clone, Naruto turned to the others and remarked, "I like him already." To Kakashi's surprise, his blonde genin was already on the roof, lying on his back and gazing up at the sky. The blonde smirked as he said, "Well, this is a surprise. I didn't expect a genin to this fast." The jonin nodded in comprehension as he said, "I was already here, Kakashi-sensei. The one you saw was just a shadow clone. This is surprising. Based on the academy reports, I assumed he would be a loud-mouthed, hyperactive brat, but this is the exact opposite of what I was led to believe about this one's behavior. And he seems to have discovered the secret of the shadow clone as well." He thought, somewhat surprised to see Naruto completely different from what the academy reports had predicted. This Naruto maintained his composure. A significant contrast to the report's claims of a loud-mouthed, hyperactive person. When the door to the roof opened and he saw the other member of his team, who appeared shocked to see the two already there, his thoughts were interrupted. After waiting for each of them to position themselves beside their teammate, Kakashi said, "Now we can introduce ourselves." Sakura asked, "Introduce ourselves?" And a drop of perspiration spread throughout the group. She was also regarded as the academy's smartest girl, right? They all thought. "Yes, you know your likes, dislikes, and dreams for the future," he concluded. Everyone started to perspire when she said to him, "Maybe you could go first to show us what you mean." Two of the genin looked at him doubtfully as he said, "All right, then. My name is Kakashi Hitaki, my likes, my dislikes. Well, I have a lot of hobbies, my dream for the future, never really thought about it." The third genin simply grinned slightly in remembrance. Sakura's eyebrows quirked at the nickname, but Kakashi pointed to her and said, "Okay, you can go next, Pinky." "My name is Sakura Haruno, my likes," she said calmly as she introduced herself. "My dreams for the future." She looked at Sasuke, blushing and giggling again. "And your dislikes?" Kakashi asked, fearing the worst. She screamed, "Ino pig and Naruto baka," and everyone covered their ringing ears. He shivered as he thought, I thought a fangirl." He pointed to Sasuke, interrupting his thoughts before they could trigger unpleasant memories. He said, "Okay, Duck Butt's turn." This made Sakura glare at him for making fun of her crush. Sasuke's eyebrows twitch, and Naruto snicker. In his flat tone, Sasuke stated, "My name is Sasuke Uchiha, I have few likes, and many dislikes, and my goal is to kill a certain man." Sakura thought, "He's so cool." While Kakashi and Naruto perspired. "I believe I just lost 10 years of my life as a result." Kakashi sighed and thought to himself, just as I thought, a brooder who is probably arrogant, thinks of nothing but himself, and is too stuck on revenge to do anything else. Pointing to Naruto, who sighed before beginning his introduction, he said, "And last, but not least, Blondie." He began, and Akane began to giggle to herself at the mention of Tenten in her. "My names are Naruto Uzumaki. My likes are ramen, training, my friends, and 2 certain people." He glared at Kakashi, who shivered and thought, "I hope that he doesn't mean what I think he means. My dislikes are arrogant people, hypocrites, rapists, those who would harm those precious to me, and a certain book series. Warm spring country, and at a hot spring, a certain pervert experienced the same chill." He thought, "Someone is trying to hurt my babies, so I have to stop them, but first I have to finish my research," before returning to his research, i.e., spying on women. Back with Naruto. Naruto was just about to complete his introduction on the academy roof when he had a nagging thought. Before beginning his dream, he thought, "I hope Ero Sennin isn't doing what I think he's doing." He jerked his head to the Hokage monument, specifically the fourth's head, which caused Kakashi's eye to widen before he continued, saying, "And my dreams for the future are to start a family with the women I love, to make my parents proud of me, and before you ask Kakashi, yes, I know who they are. And to become Hokage, not because the people will respect me, but so I can protect the village and everyone in it, because to be Hokage it means that one must not only be prepared to protect, he must be prepared to lay down his life for not only the village and civilians, but for his soldiers as well. He concluded with a burning desire in his eyes. A few reactions followed his semi-speech. Sakura's eyes widened, thinking, maybe he isn't such a doby after all. Kakashi's eyes widened even more, thinking, not only does he know who his parents are, he defiantly knows what it means to be Hokage. He was now truly surprised. He spoke to his team after gathering himself. To the surprise of the two who didn't understand, he said, now that that's over, meet me tomorrow at Training Field 7 at 5 o'clock for your Genin test. Sakura exclaimed, but Kakashi-sensei, we already had our Genin tests. Surprising them, he turned to leave but stopped at the edge of the roof before turning back to them. Actually those were to see if you had what it takes to make the rank. He said, oh, don't eat anything or you'll puke. Yawn, eh? He then vanished in a cloud of smoke. If I were you, I would eat a small breakfast and show up at 7 instead of 5 because if today was anything to go by he'll probably be late by 2 hours again. Naruto sighed before rising and turning to face his teammates. He then walked to the edge of the roof, jumped to the ground, and left. 45 minutes later, the training ground. Where is he? Tenten sighed, leaning against a tree at the training ground. At the end, she thought, I wonder what the surprise is though, because he had mentioned that he would be here immediately after finishing his team meeting. Naruto had told her that he and Akane had a surprise for her when they met for lunch that afternoon, and she had been wondering what it was all day. When she saw Naruto land in front of her, she let out another sigh, this time in relief. Angrily, she remarked, I've been waiting for 10 minutes at last. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly and apologized, sorry Ten-chan, Kakashi was later than I expected. With a hint of excitement, she said, okay, but what's this surprise you said that you had for me? When he finished, Naruto slammed his hand down on the ground and yelled, summoning jutsu. There was a puff of smoke, and when it cleared, it revealed Akane standing in front of them. Naruto nodded, bit his thumb hard enough to draw blood, and started going through a series of hand signs, the last of which seemed odd to her. Her expression was bewildered as she looked around, but then she noticed Naruto standing next to a startled-looking Tenten. She said tremblingly, how'd I get out of the seal? Naruto smirked and said, Akane-chan, you had me sign the Fox contract, right? Yeah, she replied, perplexed. She nodded once more. And you're the boss of said contract, aren't you? She asked. With a look of realization that gradually transformed into a broad smile before becoming a slight frown, she said, yes, but I don't know how that, oh, now I get it. You're saying that since I'm the boss of the Fox clan you can summon me when you want, thus bypassing the seal. She looked at Naruto anxiously, as if he were about to kill any minuet, and said, but do you realize how dangerous that could have been? What if the seal failed when I was summoned? Akane-chan, there's no chance of that happening because with the seal still working you and your chakra goes back there when you cancel it out. So there's no risk of the seal failing when I let you out because even with you out of it there's still some of your chakra left in it. Right now I'd say that you have about 7 tails of your power as that's all I meant to summon, so there's at least 2 tails worth of your chakra still in the seal keeping me alive. I can still summon those when we need it, but for now I'm just happy that you can come out for a bit. But I think that we came here to give Tenten her surprise, didn't we? He explained, asked, still smirking to the surprised as hell Tenten and Akane. In an attempt to recover from the shock of how much thought Naruto had put into this, Akane said, all right. Tenten, I would like you to become the second summoner of the Fox summoning clan. Tenten was taken aback by this statement, as she had assumed that Naruto's demonstration of Akane's ability to emerge from the seal was the surprise. However, now they are requesting that she sign a contract. Huh? Was the only thing she could manage. Tenten, Akane-chan, and I would like you to become a summoner of the Fox clan, Naruto said, laughing lightly as he moved forward. I get that part, but why me? Tenten asked, waking from her astonishment. Because it's a way that we can keep track of each other when we're on missions. Naruto was honest when he said, I'm not pushing you to sign it, but knowing that you did would mean a lot to me, because I would know you safe. Curiosity prompted Tenten to inquire, what would be the benefits? Akane succeeded him. Aside from what Naruto just told you, there would be a personal summons, who should be the first you do summon, which would be like what Gamakichi and Gamatatsu were to Naruto. Basically your combination attacks and your messengers. Then there's the boss summons, that being me, will help you if you need them for battles. The reason I offered this to Naruto was so that he could use Sage Mode again, seeing as we have the same thing, minus some differences, and once you turn 16 again we'll offer you Sage training since Naruto doesn't need to, having gone through it once already. Tenten appeared to consider her response before deciding. Okay, I'll sign it. She did so, but when they explained the different set of hand signals, she asked why, and she received the same response as Naruto. She bit her thumb to extract blood and said, "Let's try this out now." They saw a small black fox with brown eyes and two bushy white-tipped tails after she slammed her hand on the ground and yelled, "Summoning jutsu." There was a puff of smoke. "It wasn't me who summoned you, Akira, it was one of our new summoners," Akane said to the now-named Akira as the fox glanced around in bewilderment before focusing on her and bowing to her in a feminine voice. "Kyuubi-sama, what is the service you ask of me?" Tenten and Naruto raised an eyebrow at that, and Akane's perspiration fell. Akira asked inquisitively, "Which of you two was it who summoned me?" After she had only said, "I see." Tenten held up her hand slightly unsteadily. She said, "I did." "Why is it you summoned me?" Akira asked after examining her. At the end, Tenten explained sheepishly, "A couple of reasons actually. The first was to see if I actually could summon, and the second was to get my personal summons, and if I heard right from Akane-chan would be the first fox I summoned, which would be you, I guess." Akira's eyes widened, and she turned to face Akane, who nodded in agreement. Akira jumped up Tenten's shoulder, licked her cheek, and yipped with delight at Akane's affirmative nod. Her actions made Naruto and Akane perspire, and Tenten giggled a little because it tickled. Naruto asked Akane, "Oh okay, what's that about?" And Akane laughed at Akira's fondness for Tenten. "Akira-chan has always wanted a summoner, and now that she has one I guess that she can't control herself," she replied. Naruto questioned, "How do you know Akira then, Akane-chan?" He wanted to know how the two were related. Akane looked away from the pair to respond sheepishly, "Akira's my little sister." "Huh?" inquired Naruto. After noticing Naruto's perplexed expression, Akane remarked, "Well, not by blood, but we're close enough to be sisters. Remember Naruto-kun? I don't have any blood relatives other than the other tailed beasts, because we were once part of another beast." With a newfound curiosity, Naruto said, "Oh okay, but do each of the tailed beasts have genders or is it just you?" Akane smirked and declared, "Every tailed beast is female." Naruto's jaw dropped and his eyes widened to comical proportions. He was shocked to learn that all of the planet's strongest creatures, the tailed beasts, were female. He shivered as he thought, "Well, I suppose that would explain the destruction that they can cause." He said, "Akane-chan?" "Yes?" she asked, grinning to herself at his terrified expression. "Remind me to never piss you or any of your siblings off." With a smug little voice, Akane answered, "Will do, Naru-kun, will do." She then turned to face the other two members of the group and yelled, "Hey Akira-chan. Stop molesting Tenten-chan's face so we can finish talking." Tenten blushed as she approached them, and Akira paused to give Akane a fierce look. Naruto and Tenten nodded in agreement when Akane said, "Now I do believe that we are here to test out the Sage mode, aren't we?" Akira gave him a perplexed look before she stammered, "Sage M mode aka Nichan? But how could he have the Sage mode? He hasn't had the training for it and the only others to have Sage mode were the Toads." Everyone was just grinning when Naruto said, "That's right, I've had Sage training from the Toads even though I don't have the contract, yet I can still feel the energy of the earth, and Akane-chan just so happened to tell me about the foxes had the same thing and she let both me and Tenten sign the contract." Before turning to face Naruto, who had seated himself in the lotus position, Akane interrupted, saying, "I'll explain how he got the training later, but for now let's see the Sage mode." He closed his eyes, cleared his mind of everything, and started to reach out and summon the energy of the surrounding earth. "Okay, I wanted to see if I can use the Rasen Shuriken as effectively as I had been able to anyway." Akira questioned, "Rasen Shuriken?" The other two women simply grinned and said, "She'll see." Naruto felt the nature chakra respond to his call right away, and it entered his chakra network. As he balanced it out, he noticed that he felt slightly different from the toad version. He could feel his hair growing wilder, his canines growing longer, and he guessed that if he could see himself from the side, he would notice that his whisker lines were darkening. Akane and Tenten were staring at him like a fish out of water when he opened his eyes. The perspectives of Tenten, Akira, and Akane. The changes had occurred almost immediately after Naruto had ceased speaking in order to meditate. His whiskers darkened, his hair grew wilder, and he developed a dark red pigment around his eyes. His eyes had changed from a cerulean blue to a blood red with pupil slits when he opened them, reminiscent of his original state of Jinchuriki. They simply gazed into their own minds. "That's how I would appear in Sage mode. Cool. Right now, Naruto-kun appears so feral. I wonder if..." "No, bad tenant. You must not be harboring erotic thoughts." were Tenten's thoughts, which abruptly shifted from admiration to perversion and finally to reprimand. Wow, that looks really awesome. Akira pouted and thought, I wish I had sage training too. Then she smelled something odd that seemed to be coming from both Tenten and Akane. When some of the other foxes were in heat, she had previously smelled that scent. No way, aka Nichan has chosen a mate. She realized, her eyes widening once more. She smirked slightly as she thought, and if my nose isn't wrong, which it never is, Tenten has chosen him as hers too. That's how it appears, then. Although I've never seen my clan's sage mode, I knew it was strong, but I wasn't prepared for it to be this strong based on Naruto's chakra levels, which suddenly increased. His reserves performed similarly to the Toad's version, but if he were to combine the two, his potential power would be unimaginable. As she started to feel a little hot under the collar, Akane's thoughts drifted off into the M-rated territory. I have definitely chosen a worthy mate. Normal perspective. Naruto asked in a slightly deeper voice, what? The sight of Naruto raising an eyebrow at them caused 3 startled and 2 slightly aroused women to break out of their reprimanding, realizing, or perverted thoughts. They nodded in agreement while blushing and appearing sheepish. It looks good, Naruto-kun, though I can see what you mean by differences. Akane nodded in agreement. I thought that there would be differences, but I mostly meant with the pupils in the eye and pigment coloring, not growing more feral to go with, she replied. Naruto became intrigued and inquired, what do you mean by that, Akane-chan? Well, like I explained to you before, I had said that there would be a change in the pigment and eye colors to match that of a fox's, right? She received a nod from him. The thing is that I've never seen my clan's version of sage mode being used by humans before. Only by the sages of the clan. I didn't expect you to become feral looking. People could mistake you for using my chakra if you were letting out killing intent, she clarified. Akira questioned in confusion, what do you mean by using your chakra, aka Nichan? You know I've been sealed for the last 13 years, right? Akane asked her sister, looking a little taken aback. Akira nodded, well, meet my Jinchuriki. She pointed to Naruto, who waved. Her face began to take on a menacing appearance, with her eyes narrowing into a glare and her teeth exposed. So you're the one that she got sealed into. Just let me tell you this though. Then her expression changed to a smile. If you hurt my sister, I will hunt you down and make you wish you were never born a man. Naruto shivered and quickly nodded his head in fear as she said, but if you don't, everything will be alright between us. Even fox females are scary, Naruto said. He pondered. With an insane smile that was reflected by the other two and one that was perspiring at the other's appearance, he said, now let's try out the Rasen Shuriken. When Akira saw the appearances of her sister Tenten and Naruto, she thought, to have that look, this has got to be a good jutsu. Tenten had the look because she enjoyed anything that was shaped like a weapon and caused mass destruction, while Akane had the look because she enjoyed things that went boom and caused mass destruction. Who said girls didn't enjoy such things? He made 2 clones and made his favorite hand sign. He held out his hand, one with its hands facing him and the other jabbing at them. This continued for a few seconds before they began to see the Rasengan form. It then began to glow a ghostly white, developing 4 blades, taking the shape of a small shuriken before beginning to grow larger. As the Rasen Shuriken took shape, a screeching sound that sounded almost like a bell could be heard, growing louder. What a chakra! To possess this degree of wind manipulation. This type of thing is impossible for even our most proficient wind users. Who exactly is this man? As Akira stared at the jutsu, she thought in wonder. Before Naruto raised his hand and threw it at the sky while yelling, wind style. Rasenshuriken. Everyone gazed at it in memory and, in one case, in shock for a minute. He snapped his fingers after letting it fly a considerable distance. Instantaneous expansion caused the Rasen Shuriken to grow to a quarter of a mile in diameter. When it was fully grown, it resembled a massive sphere made entirely of chakra and wind, and the screeching sound was much louder than before. The Tower of Hokage. The old Hokage yelled, "What the fuck is that?" as he peered out his window at a training field in the distance. This occurred after the day had begun fairly normally. He had been taking a break from his paperwork and was gazing out the window when he saw a giant shuriken fly into the sky. It then abruptly grew and transformed into the dome that, if the faint sound of a nearby bell is to be believed, he and most likely everyone else in the village could now see and hear. He yelled, "Anbu!" to the Black Ops team. The person in the cat mask exclaimed, "Yes, Hokage-sama," as they appeared to salute their elderly leader. Pointing to the apparent dome of wind in the distance, Hiruzen commanded, "Go and investigate whatever or whoever is causing that." They all exclaimed, "Yes, sir," and departed using the body flicker technique. Whatever jutsu that is, it's surely S-ranked, he thought as he watched the now dispersing dome. I hope to hell whoever the wielder is that he's on our side. Back with the girls and Naruto, they all exclaimed, "That was awesome," as they observed the training field's damage. The training ground was in utter disarray after the S-ranked jutsu had scattered. Trees had been torn up and thrown all over, and there was a cart where the wind and chakra dome had come into contact with the ground. Before my sage chakra runs out, I think I can do 5 more. That will definitely be useful. Naruto was impressed because, prior to losing Sage Mode, he could only launch roughly 2 Rasen Shurikens, but now it seemed as though he had amassed enough nature chakra for 6 of them. He concluded, it must be the increased chakra reserves. This jutsu is so destructive that I adore it. What might occur if he created an additional elemental variant of the Rasengan? As she considered all the potential elemental variations to the Rasengan, Akane pondered. With the exception of the tailed beast bomb, no other jutsu can match the damage caused by this. Tenten watched in wonder, thinking, but even though I haven't seen it in a long time, the damage it causes still amazes me. What a jutsu! It must have taken months or even years of training to even be able to use it. Akira stared in stunned awe and thought, I see why Oni-chan picked him as her mate. Naruto had a sudden realization. With anxiety, he said, girls? They turned to face him and heard the nervousness in his voice. Yeah? He asked. I think that the whole village was able to see that. He continued to be nervous, which made the girls' eyes widen. So I think that we should run, he yelled as they took off quickly. Until they were 2 miles from the field, they continued to run. The following morning as Naruto entered Training Ground 7, he let out a sigh. His and the girls' outing yesterday appeared to have caused quite a stir. Every ninja he saw later was moving in that direction. They were fortunate to leave the area at that time because it would have been too late to do so 10 seconds later. After a few hours, the girls had left him and Akane to return home, and once he had gotten used to being outside once more, Akane had returned to the mindscape. He looked up and saw Sakura and Sasuke sitting against a tree in the center of the field, and he sighed once more. Sakura yelled, Naruto baka, you're late, and attempted to punch him as soon as she saw him. He avoided it, caught her arm, and pinned it behind her back just like he had done yesterday. After calling out to the trees, Naruto asked rhetorically, what did I tell you about that? And as for me being late, Sensei isn't here at the moment, so as long as I'm here before Sensei is then I'm not late, am I Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi was taken aback when he was called out because he had been watching his genin interact with one another. He walked calmly out of the trees and over to his team, stifling his surprise for the time being. He stopped in front of them and said, Naruto's right, Sakura. But I have to ask, how is it that you knew I was there, Naruto? Naruto merely grinned and said, a good ninja never tells his secrets. Kakashi nodded, awaiting the response, for the time being, anyway. Very well, your test is 2, he said, pulling 2 bells from his hip pouch. Get these bells from me. None of you will be able to pass without one. Sakura said, Sensei, there are only 2 bells and there are 3 of us. Kakashi surprised the 2 people who were unaware by saying, yes, then it seems that only 2 of you will pass then. Now you must come at me with the intent to kill or you won't get them, understand? He inquired. Everyone nodded at him. All right, he said, then let the test start. All 3 vanished into the nearby forest after that. Shortly after he began the test, Kakashi stood in the center of the training field and sighed. Well, he thought, at least 2 of them are good at hiding. With Sakura in a bush to his left and Sasuke perched atop a tree near the start of the forest, he could see where the 2 were hiding. These days, what are they teaching in the academy? How can one be killed? He asked, able to see Sakura's pink hair clearly. Though unable to detect Naruto's chakra, Kakashi pondered, I wonder where the other one is though. In the meantime, Naruto was contemplating how he might persuade his teammates to cooperate with him while seated in a tree quite a distance away. He had thought about simply letting them fail, but he was aware that he would need to ensure that the team truly came together in order to change the timeline. He would therefore need to rescue Sasuke from Orochimaru and retrieve his friends. All he needed to do now was figure out how to make them cooperate with him. With an evil smirk, he thought, though it won't be me getting the 1,000 years of death this time, and sighed as he made the decision to simply repeat something from the previous time. Kakashi was a little taken aback when he saw Naruto emerge from the trees in a composed manner. Naruto stopped a few feet from his sensei and simply stared at him, to which he returned the stare. As he chose to start a conversation, Naruto sighed once more and said, I know this test is about teamwork, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi's eyes widened at Naruto's statement. He was aware of the test's purpose. He said, so you figured it out. Yep, and I know more than you think, like how your teammate Obito Uchiha gave you that Sharingan you hide behind your headband. Naruto laughed. After learning who his father was, Kakashi was even more shocked than he had been the day before. Now, he knew who his teammates were. Who exactly was this child? He stammered, how do you know all this? To Kakashi's further surprise, Naruto added, well, as to how I know about my parents, I've met them. Well, Dad at least. He decided to start the upcoming fight by charging in and aiming a punch at Kakashi's face. And as to the Obito thing, do you honestly think that after finding out about my parents that I wouldn't research everything I could about them? He asked. Kakashi dodged the fist and responded with a kick to Naruto's side that struck and sent him skidding a meter away. How could you have met them? The last I checked, Minato-sensei and Kushina died in the Kyuubi's attack the night you were born. Naruto stopped and made 4 clones, who charged Kakashi with their fists up while he remained behind making hand signals. After dodging a blow from the left, Kakashi kicked the clone in the stomach, which caused it to dispel. He then leapt above a sweeping kick from the back and threw a kunai behind him, dispelling the clone as he landed. He then punched an incoming clone, which also dispelled it. Seeing another clone approaching from the front with a fist raised, he leapt back and punched it in the temple. He turned to see the final clone holding a shuriken and preparing to throw it. Kakashi rushed in and punched it in the side of the face, dispelling it. Just as he was about to return to the original, a voice behind him yelled, "Wind style! Great breakthrough!" And a huge gust of wind rushed forward. A genin could never perform elemental jutsu. Too much chakra is needed. As he was flung toward a tree on the field's edge, Kakashi thought in surprise. He went up in smoke when he hit, and a smashed log took his place. A replacement. Below. A muffled voice from beneath the ground yelled before he was pulled downwards. Naruto thought in alarm before looking around him. If he's not to sides and not above me, then that means he thought before a hand caught his foot. After the dust settled, Kakashi was seen standing above Naruto, who was literally neck deep in the ground. Kakashi exclaimed, "Earth style! Headhunter jutsu!" Before focusing on Naruto. Kakashi said, "Now would you mind answering my question?" "Sorry sensei, but I'm not the real one," Naruto grinned. Prior to the clone dispersing, Kakashi's eye widened. How could a shadow clone make more clones? Was all he could think. With the authentic Naruto, in his search for Sasuke and Sakura, the real Naruto had just located Sasuke when the clone he was using to fight Kakashi dispelled the memories. He muttered, "Stupid clone, revealed too much." Looking up, he saw that Sasuke had been watching the battle between the clone and Kakashi with wide eyes, fortunately too far away to hear what the fighters had to say otherwise. The person jumped a little and turned to face Naruto when he approached and whispered, "Hey Sasuke. What do you want, Dobi?" Sasuke glared at Naruto. "This is going to be difficult," Naruto thought with a sigh before he spoke aloud. "I thought that maybe we could set aside our differences and work together." "You've got to be joking. As if I'd work with you," Sasuke said haughtily as he turned to leave after simply staring. Sasuke just stared at Naruto blankly before he said, "Fine. What is it you had in mind?" Naruto sighed in frustration, jumped in front of him, blocked his path, and angrily said, "Will you just listen to what other people are saying for once in your life?" Sasuke raised an eyebrow and said, "Why would we need her to pass this?" Naruto grinned and said, "Good. Now before I tell you my plan, we have to find Sakura." Sasuke simply shook his head in response to Naruto's question, "Have you ever heard of a two-man genin cell before?" Naruto explained, grinning at Sasuke's increasingly shocked expression, "Exactly, they've all I've ever seen are the 3 genin and the Jonin sensei. So this test has to be a setup, make us fight each other over the bells thing." After giving it some thought, Sasuke came to the conclusion that Naruto was right. He nearly slapped himself for not realizing this earlier. Depressed, he said, "Okay, let's find Sakura." Naruto smiled and said, "I knew you'd see it my way." After Kakashi finished his genjutsu lesson, Sakura was easy to find because, as we all know, the genjutsu was identical to canon. The issue was persuading her to collaborate with him at the time. She had been all for Sasuke's aid but not Naruto's. However, they were able to win her over to their way of thinking in the end. Naruto set out to be the primary distraction after outlining his strategy. With Kakashi, Kakashi had been considering how he could have known everything that he did after Naruto's clone had been dispelled. Similar to how Naruto knew he possessed the Sharingan or how he recognized his parents. Kakashi was aware that anyone who looked into the Yondaime's students would know that Obito was his teammate. But he was unaware of how Naruto found out about his parents. Damn it. The Hokage had concealed his ancestry to keep him safe. Additionally, he was aware that the Hokage intended to inform the village of his ancestry when he arrived in Jonin and to disclose it when he arrived in Chunin. However, the fact that Naruto had not only heard about them but also claimed to have met his father was what truly bothered him. This should not have been possible. How did he get to know them? He tried to wrap his head over everything, thinking, Sensei and Kushina-san were dead the last I checked. The sound of a kunai slicing through the air startled him out of his reverie. To get it to fly past him, he cocked his head to the left. Kakashi turned to Naruto, who was standing a few meters away, and said, "So you're trying again." As he assumed a fighting stance, Naruto questioned, "Well, if at first you don't succeed, then try again, is the saying, isn't it?" As he assumed his own position, Kakashi remarked, "True, but you still haven't answered my question." Naruto sighed and considered his options for an explanation before coming up with a version of the truth. It was the night of the scroll incident. Unexpectedly, Kakashi looked down as Naruto said, "When I had gotten home I was feeling depressed at finally knowing why I was hated. You should know what my life has been like, seeing as you were one of the Anbu that was protecting me most of the time." Naruto was right when he said that he had been beaten a lot and that Kakashi and his other guards had only been unable to stop them because they had been on missions that only they could complete. Kakashi said in a melancholy voice, "Yeah, I know. But for what it's worth, sorry for not being able to stop some of the beatings." Naruto smiled a little as he explained, "The ones that got through were during the times when I and the others that don't hate you were out on missions." Naruto replied, "Yeah, I figured as much," he said, "but back the story." Kakashi's head twitched excitedly. Kakashi's eyes grew wide as he said, "I was so full of hatred that I went into the seal." Kakashi's eyes widened even more as he said, "I met the Kyuubi, and it, sorry Akane-chan, tempted me into removing the seal." As he recalled, Kakashi's eyes had changed from surprise to bewilderment. "I almost did, but Dad stopped me," he said incredulously. What do you mean he stopped you?" Naruto grinned and remarked, "Yeah, it surprised me too when I saw him," as he said, "but it turns out Dad had left the last of his and Mom's chakra in the seal in case it was ever close to breaking." Kakashi nearly passed out from shock. One of the happiest smiles Kakashi had ever seen adorned Naruto's face as he said, "He told me who my mother was and the condition of how I'll meet her, but the most important thing that he told me was, that he believes in me." Astonished, Kakashi couldn't help but laugh. His sensei would definitely do that. Kakashi inquired, "So what was the condition for you to meet your mother?" He had a lot of expectations, but this was not one of them. "When I go to fight Kyuubi for its chakra." All that came out of a startled Kakashi's mouth was, "Huh?" Naruto said, "You heard me, sensei." Kakashi questioned, How can he expect you to fight the Kyuubi?" As if it didn't matter, Naruto remarked, "Honestly, I don't know, but I'll burn that bridge when I come to it." In reality, though, it didn't, as Akane's chakra would be much simpler to use now that she was not using genjutsu. Naruto exclaimed, "Now that that's over with." He then cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, "Now guys." Kakashi realized that Naruto had mostly used this as a diversion. As soon as Naruto gave the signal, shuriken and kunai descended upon the area. Kakashi deflected the remainder and dodged the majority. As Sasuke yelled, "Fire style! Fireball jutsu!" he felt a sensation of heat on his back. When he turned, he saw a massive ball of fire descending on him. Come on, two genin with elemental jutsu abilities. As he narrowly avoided it, he thought. Since Naruto had invested more chakra in his jutsu than Sasuke had, he let out a blast of wind that caused the fireball to not only grow but also change direction as he yelled, "Wind style! Great breakthrough!" from the other side of the fireball. This is the reason the academy doesn't teach this stuff. As he replaced it with a log, Kakashi thought to himself, "I'm crying anime tears." However, he had to jump back from a volley of shuriken from Sakura, who had been waiting in the tree line. However, he stepped on a thin line of ninja wire after he had leapt back, which caused more kunai to emerge from the trees. How did they obtain all of the kunai? He pondered. He immediately felt something holding his legs down as he ducked to the right. He noticed a pair of hands emerging from the ground holding him down as he looked down. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura only needed that brief distraction to dash in and use ninja wire to restrain him. The hands that had been holding him dispersed in a puff of smoke after he was restrained. When Kakashi saw his own jutsu being used against him, he thought, "That little copycat," and he started to perspire. Sakura approached their sensei and removed the bells that were fastened to his belt after noticing that he was immobile. Well, it seems that you passed Sakura. Now who are you going to give the other bell to? Kakashi responded. Sakura's inner personality was screaming at her to give it to Sasuke so they could be on the team together and to send Naruto back to the academy while she was looking at her teammates. As much as I hate the prospect of being on a team with Naruto Baka, I say that it's either we all pass or none of us pass, she said, letting out a sigh before lowering the bells. Kakashi was a little taken aback by Sakura's response, but he turned to see Naruto and Sasuke nodding in agreement. With thunderclouds gathering, he said in a dark voice, "Is that your final answer?" To indicate that they were sticking to their response, all three gave a defiant nod. When the clouds dissipated, he said, "Very well then, you all pass." The other two were stunned, but Naruto just grinned. The only thing they would say was, "Huh?" Cue Kakashi's canonical speech. Simply put, I'm too exhausted and lazy to type it. Now meet up here at 9 so we can start our training and missions. Kakashi stated. To the surprise of two of his students, Kakashi said, "Though, Naruto, I would like to talk to you for a moment." The students then left. "Okay, Kakashi-sensei, what is it that you needed me for?" Naruto asked, although he had a suspicion as to why, after they had waited for a minute to walk far enough away to be unheard. "Did you use all that for a distraction or were you telling the truth?" Kakashi sighed. He said, "It was both. Though I don't even know why I told you to begin with, and to be honest, he had no idea why he had told you." Naruto's smirk was visible from space. "Thank you for sharing this with me. It means a lot to know that a part of Minato-sensei was able to meet and talk to his son, if only for a bit." Kakashi simply stared at him for a moment before shaking his head. "However, I have to ask, how is it that your clones were able to make clones?" he asked, clearly delighted. Clones typically lacked the chakra necessary to perform a powerful jutsu. It was simply not feasible for Naruto to create more clones in addition to performing a C-ranked wind jutsu. Kakashi nodded as Naruto grinned and said, "You know I have more chakra than just about anybody in this village, don't you? The chakra level 1 have is probably more than the old man's at this point. But since the chakra is split evenly, if I don't make more than 3 clones, they themselves can make clones. Though the memories of those go to the clones that made them," he concluded with a bit of sheepishness. By the time Naruto had finished explaining, Kakashi's eyes were practically bulging out of his head. He was startled when he heard Naruto ask a question he hadn't anticipated. "Sensei, if I could ask you to keep the fact that I know about my parents a secret from the old man, could you?" Naruto was worried. After giving it some thought, Kakashi sighed once more and said, "I could do that, but how much do you know about your father? Do you know about his jutsus?" Naruto considered the extent to which he ought to inform Kakashi. Kakashi's eyes widened in shock as he responded, "Pretty much everything that was in the history books, and yes, I know and am able to preform the Rasengan." He felt that a little more information couldn't hurt. A little uncertain, he said, "Show me." Holding his hand out in a swirling sphere of chakra, Naruto said, "All right." Fortunately, he and Tenten were able to gain enough control over their enormous reserves yesterday to have a reasonable degree of control over them. If it were possible, Kakashi's eyes had widened even more than before. He stammered, how is it that you can use that jutsu? Do you really think that after find out the secret to the shadow clone that I wouldn't have looked up my father's jutsus and then use it to master them?" Naruto grinned. Kakashi inquired, "When did you master it?" "I started working on it the day before yesterday, but I got it down yesterday." Naruto told the truth. Hey, he needed to think of something. Kakashi was completely astounded by Naruto's response. In just 2 days, a fucking genin, had mastered one of the most difficult A-ranked jutsus. Incredulously, Kakashi thought, this child is a genius to be able to get it down in that time frame. "Okay, I can keep this a secret, but could you do one thing for me?" he asked, nodding and sighing, again, to himself. "What's that?" Naruto raised an eyebrow in question. He said, "Untie me." Naruto started to perspire. Naruto cut his sensei loose and said, "Yeah, I can do that." They then parted ways. Several of the most well-known Jonin from the Leaf Village are positioned in front of their elderly leader in the Hokage Tower. One of them was a woman who many men would kill for her beauty, and many women would kill for her appearance. She wore what appeared to be bandages, with her left sleeve being red, and she had dark hair and red eyes. She was Konoha's Ice Queen, Kurenai Yuhi, and Genjutsu Mistress. Another was a man with short, black, spiky hair and brown eyes. He was smoking a cigarette and had a V-shaped beard. He was dressed in black pants, black shinobi sandals, and a green Konoha flak jacket. Additionally, he wore a sash bearing the kanji word for fire. The third Hokage's son, Asuma Sarutobi, was the man's name. They shared a common trait with all the other Jonin. This year, each of them had taken a team. They were now awaiting Kakashi Hitaki, who was notoriously late. "Well, we might as well begin seeing as Kakashi won't be here for at least another hour," said the elderly Kage. "So tell me who has passed and who has failed?" asked the man. The Jonins began to enumerate the teams. Team 1 fail. Team 2 fail. Team 3 fail. Team 4 fail. Team 5 fail. Team 6 fail. Kurenai was ready to announce whether her team had succeeded or failed when a Shunshin and Kakashi appeared in the background, accompanied by a poof sound and a plume of smoke. After a moment of silence, Kakashi looked up from his book and said, "Yo." With a tiny drop of perspiration forming on the back of his head, Hiruzen said, "Right on time, Kakashi, so tell us, did Team 7 pass or not?" Several people were surprised by Kakashi's response when he said, "Team 7, pass." However, a random Jonin interrupted, saying, "Well, that should have been obvious with Uchiha-sama on the team." Many nodded with Kakashi until he broke the ice. Actually, it was Naruto that figured out the purpose of the bell test. And it seems he saw through my lies about not eating and showing up early, Kakashi said, sounding a little proudly. Many were shocked by Kakashi's statement. Did Naruto Uzumaki, the dead last member of the academy and the person who failed the graduation exams twice, figure out why the bell test was given? Many of the people there didn't think it was possible. Despite his surprise, the Hokage was always proud of his surrogate grandson. He inquired about the performance of each team, asking, "Very well, what is your assessment of Team 7 then?" Kakashi took a moment to compose himself before explaining to everyone how his team had worked. He surprised everyone by saying, "When I first started with Naruto, I thought he would be the loud-mouthed brat who couldn't even use a jutsu right. But during the test, he showed that he was able to use his shadow clones to the fullest and was capable of using a C-ranked wind jutsu. But I was greatly surprised that he not only figured out the true purpose of the test but convinced the others to work with him. Naruto has the ability to be a great team leader and is the strongest on my team and, quite possibly, his whole class." Everyone was even more taken aback than before. In addition to figuring out the true goal of the test, the so-called Dobi of the academy somehow persuaded his teammates, who were the least likely to cooperate, to work with him. He was capable of taking charge and, if his sensei was correct, he was the strongest member of both his team and possibly his class. Even though the Hokage was very proud of Naruto, he needed to know how strong all of his future soldiers were, not just one. "And the others?" asked the Sarutobi. Once more, Kakashi took a moment to collect his thoughts before continuing. "How so?" the Hokage asked, raising an eyebrow at Kakashi's statement that Sasuke ultimately is an extremely talented genin, but he needs to learn how to work well with others. Well, while he is capable of working with others, he at first refused to work with Naruto at all. He only did so when Naruto pointed out the hints that I left for them, he told the elderly leader. With a hint of pride in his voice, Kakashi addressed his two male genin, saying, "But once he actually works with Naruto, it's almost flawless." "And Sakura?" inquired the Hokage. At this point, Kakashi's demeanor clearly soured. His head drooped slightly and his shoulders drooped. "Something wrong, Kakashi?" The Hokage's eyebrows shot up at this. "No, Hokage-sama, it's just that Sakura's performance." Kakashi trailed off a little at the end, struggling to find the right words, but he surprised the others by saying, "Well, to put it nicely, it was disappointing." The Hokage asked, somewhat perplexed as to why Sakura's performance would be subpar. "Why is that?" "Her records from the academy said that she was ranked in the top of her class." "Then someone should go and check what exactly they're teaching then, because out of all the three on my team she is the worst off," Kakashi said with his arms crossed. Although many of the Jonin in the room secretly agreed with him, his open disapproval surprised many of them. But the Hokage only gave a small laugh. It was past time for someone else to ask what the academy was teaching. "I'll look into it later, but for now, please, tell me how Sakura performed," Hiruzen replied. Kakashi remarked, "Very well, Hokage-sama," before beginning his evaluation of his female pupil. Many of the Jonin there frowned and thought, "Oh great, a fangirl." He said, "As I said before, her performance was disappointing. From the very beginning she was more worried for Sasuke than she was about herself passing the test. I had sent a clone to observe them all before I had started fighting Naruto. It observed a Naruto clone convincing Sasuke, left after he had, and then it put Sakura in an E-ranked genjutsu, which should have been easy enough for her to get out of, but instead she screamed and passed out, alerting Naruto and Sasuke, who had been searching for her, to her position. After they had roused her, she immediately tried hitting Naruto after he suggested working together, saying, and I quote, "Naruto baka, why would Sasuke-kun or I work with you?" After which, Sasuke pointed out what Naruto had to him earlier and she immediately agreed with him like a loyal puppy. Kakashi said with slight disdain, blame him for. Many jonin believed that fangirls were a useless group. Many of them were unsure of how they managed to get into the academy in the first place, but they were aware that the civilian council had taken over the academy's curriculum following the Kyuubi attack, which made it simpler for their kids to become ninja. As he concluded his team evaluation, Kakashi stated, Sakura didn't play that much of a role in the end, but what she did do was mostly with kunai and shuriken. As Kakashi retreated and Kurenai advanced, the Hokage remarked, very well then, now that Team 7's assessment is done, we'll move on to Team 8. Kurenai smiled and said, Team 8 passes. She continued by describing how her team's nearly perfect tracking and teamwork helped them pass. She only really mentioned that Kiba and Hinata's attitudes needed improvement. Kiba's overly brazen demeanor needed to be softened, and Hinata's overly timid demeanor needed to be bolstered. With a broad smile, Asuma stepped forward as she took a step back and said, Team 10 passes. He described how his team used fundamental Ino Shikacho formations and how they passed with great teamwork after years of working together when their families got together. The age-challenged Cage remarked, all right, then Teams 7, 8, and 10 pass and Teams 1, 6 fail. Everyone is dismissed except for Kakashi. Everyone, with the exception of Kakashi, who had a curious expression. A serious Kakashi asked, what is it you need of me, Hokage-sama? I have a feeling that there's more to Naruto's skills than you told everyone. The Hokage sighed before continuing. Yeah, he's a lot more skilled than I led everyone to believe, but he has asked me to keep most of what he revealed to me a secret from everyone. Kakashi sighed, a little taken aback, but he also admitted that he surprised even him with how much he knows and what he's capable of. At this point, Hiruzen was both shocked and incredibly proud. Proud of his growing ninja skills and surprised that Naruto wanted to keep secrets from him. He was aware, however, that each ninja had to keep his secrets. The way Naruto was developing made him laugh. Very well, but what can you tell me about his skills and how would you place him? Asked the man. Upon admitting that he would be putting them in the Chunin exams, Kakashi surprised the Hokage by saying, I can't tell you anything about his skills, but what I can say is that you will be very surprised when you see him in the next Chunin exams. Kakashi simply grinned. To the Sarutobi's further surprise, he added, but overall, I would say that what he showed me was at least high Chunin, maybe low Jonin level. How in the world could this recently graduated genin be that strong so soon after graduating? That's what they were talking about. I wish they knew, don't they? The man stammered in surprise. Are you serious, Kakashi? Even if he's had years to train, he couldn't have gotten that strong. Kakashi simply grinned once more. With a laugh, Kakashi questioned, what was the jutsu that he recently came across, Hokage-sama? The Cage's eyes grew wide with insight. The shadow clone? He exclaimed, astonished. Replied, exactly. My guess is that he was keeping a list of jutsu that he was studying for years, and since he recently got the jutsu and knew the benefits, he spent the day off that he had before team assignments to train in them all. Said Kakashi. With Naruto's use of the shadow clones, which only he, as far as he knew, could do, the Hokage's eyes were now wide open. Very well then, Kakashi, you may leave, but do inform me on how your team is doing, especially on how Naruto improves, he said, laughing once more and nodding. Before leaving the office, Kakashi gave his leader a nod and a quick salute. With Naruto, after the Rasen Shuriken incident, they decided to use a training field, where Naruto was waiting for Tenten. We tried that, but what were we thinking? He was correct when he said, the training ground we were using hasn't been empty since. The Anbu had roped off the area and prevented anyone from entering. Akane said in a naive tone, it wasn't my idea, Naruto-kun, it was yours. Naruto started to perspire. Now that's unfair, Akane-chan, he complained. You were all for the idea before we had to run for it. He thought to her, and a smirk appeared on his face as he could almost feel her pouting at him. In an attempt to reach him, Akane said, I could withdraw the contract and let you fend for yourself until you get the Toad contract, you know. It was a great success. Naruto somehow entered the mindscape after hearing Akane's words, and he was kneeling in front of her. Please, please don't do that, Aka-chan. I'll do anything to keep the ability to summon. He then asked, besides, how am I going to be able to bring you out of the seal for our date tonight? In response to his thoughts. A date? she inquired, her eyes wide and flushed. In an attempt to understand why he hadn't done this when the three of them first met, he said, "What? Can't I take you or Tenten out every now and then?" Subsequently, he became aware that Akane's lips were attacking his. This caught him off guard, as Akane was typically reserved when it came to such activities. When he sensed her tongue requesting entry, he parted his lips and engaged her in combat. He was a little taken aback when he discovered that her mouth tasted like raspberries, even though they had kissed before, but it had never been this way. When Naruto's tongue touched Akane's, she groaned. "Oh Kami, if this is what kissing feels like, then I can't wait for when he's in his older body to get to the good stuff," Akane thought, moaning once more. She had never felt this way before, and she was in heaven. They separated from one another, panting a little as they realized they needed air. With a sly smile, Naruto said, "I assume you'd like to go out tonight?" And Akane nodded enthusiastically. With an equally excited tone, Akane exclaimed, "Oh yes, I would really enjoy being able to go on a date tonight, Naruto-kun." Sensing her fellow Naruto fan entering the training area and shoving the blonde into reality, she said, "Though summon me when you get out, Ten-chan is here." The first thing Naruto saw when he opened his eyes was Tenten's smiling face near him. He smiled and said, "Hey Ten-chan, what's up?" She closed the distance and planted a passionate kiss on his lips, saying, "Not much, just that I've been waiting to do this since this morning." Naruto smirked into it and started a struggle for supremacy after his eyes widened in surprise once more. Only when the need to breathe became too great did they stop. "How did I ever get this lucky?" he muttered, mostly to himself, but Tenten could still hear him as he pulled back a little, grinning even more. "Don't know, you're just lucky, I suppose." She smiled a little. Akane said in Naruto's mind, "Not that I don't mind the meet and greet, but I do believe that you have to ask her something, Naruto." Naruto nodded to her as he moved away from Tenten, bit his thumb, and went through the hands before slamming his hand down and smirking as he stood in front of them in a puff of smoke. She grinned even more as she turned to face Naruto. "Don't you have something to ask her?" Akane asked, causing Tenten to glance at them bewildered. Before approaching Tenten and taking her hands in his, he said, "Right." He said softly, "Tenten, would you do me the honor of taking you and Akane-chan out to dinner tonight?" Tenten's face was a tomato red color. "Naruto-kun is requesting to see me." Since this would be her first date, she thought in shock and embarrassment, which was to be expected. "You okay, Ten-chan?" Naruto asked, his concern evident in his voice, and she snapped out of her reverie as she saw his face near hers with a worried expression. Tenten said, still flushed, "Why yeah, I'm fine. And of course you can take me out to dinner," she exclaimed with a big smile. Akane, who had been observing from the sidelines, said, "Good. Then he'll pick us up here at 7 tonight then." She took Tenten's arm in hers and started dragging her away, claiming the panda-haired girl was too perplexed by her own actions to take any action. When Naruto called after them, he asked, "Hey, what about training?" Emerging from her bewilderment, Tenten said, "Yeah, don't we have to train?" Referring to her blue kimono, she remarked, "Not today, we don't, we have to get ready for our date tonight." "I don't know about Tenten, but I could use a few more outfits than what I'm usually wearing." She concluded by leaving the field with Tenten still firmly in her grasp, saying, "So we're going to spend this time shopping." Naruto simply watched them go until he could no longer see them. Before leaving to make reservations and shop for his own clothes, he sighed when he couldn't see them and remarked, "Girls are weird." An hour later with Akane and Tenten. The trip from the training ground to the closest clothes store had taken a long time. Tenten looked at some of the clothing in her size that the store had to offer and asked, was it really a good idea to just leave him without letting him know where we're going? "I figured that we could let him do his own shopping and to get reservations somewhere." Akane, who was inside the changing room trying on something she had found, grinned as she peered out from behind the curtain. "Though I think that we should go over who else is going to be with Naru-kun." After Akane finished speaking, Tenten looked up and said, "Yeah, I've been thinking about that too, and I've got an idea on who else there should be." "Oh, do tell." Akane raised her eyebrows and said, "Well, you know that Naruto-kun saved Gaia from her own tailed beast, right?" Tenten said thoughtfully at the end, "And from the look that I saw her give him when we revived her, she might like him romantically, though we'd have to find a way to save her from the one-tails again." Tenten stared at Akane in bewilderment as she said, "I think I might know who else would like him provided that we can introduce them when he goes on that mission to Takigakure, Hidden Waterfall Village." Akane also appeared thoughtful before her expression changed to a smile. Akane's smile widened as she asked in confusion, "Who would that be?" "The only person Naruto knows from that village is Shibuki. So who could you be meaning?" Her statement caused Tenten's eyes to enlarge. Gaia isn't the only female Jinchuriki. Tenten realized what Akane meant when she concluded, Taki happens to have one of their own and it just so happens that said Jinchuriki is female. Tenten inquired inquisitively, so you're saying that we should get Taki's Jinchuriki together with Naruto-kun? After nodding, Akane turned back to face the room and said, in a low voice, yeah, and if what I've heard from Shichibi is right, she's had a similar time to what Naruto-kun's had to being a Jinchuriki. Tenten's head lowered in sorrow as she recalled Naruto's past. She could understand why Akane would want to have her with him if someone else had been like that. When she remembered what Akane had said, her head jerked up in realization. Confused, she inquired, what do you mean by what I've heard from Shichibi? Akane blinked at her question for a second before understanding what she meant. She peeked her head out from behind the curtain once more and said, oh, didn't I mention that we tailed beasts can communicate with each other? As she pulled back the curtain to show what she had chosen to wear for the evening, she sighed and said, yeah, I probably should have told you guys sooner. But since we were born from the same being we have mental connections to each other and can communicate every now and then. Tenten responded negatively. Tenten's eyes widened as she saw what Akane had on, and then she grinned and said, Akane-chan, I do think that what you have on will wow Naru-kun tonight. Her expression then changed to one of contemplation, and she looked around the room filled with kimonos and said, now all we have to do is find something for E to wear. Just outside the training field with Naruto. As Naruto approached the training field, he swallowed uneasily. A red nine-tailed fox sitting on the back of his formal black kimono with its tail spread out behind it was the design. He hoped the girls would enjoy his plans for the evening, but he had been concerned about their reactions. All he could say was, beautiful, as his eyes widened upon seeing what the two were wearing, interrupting his thoughts as they were waiting for him. Tenten's purple kimono, which featured flower petals, had a small V-neck that exposed just enough cleavage to catch his attention without being too obvious. Her hair had been let down and braided into two braids that reached her mid-back, after having been in her twin buns earlier that day. Akane was wearing a dark blue kimono with a swan-flying design all over it. It was slightly more V-necked than Tenten's, but not by much. Normally her hair fell to her shoulders, but this time it was pulled up in a bun. He also saw that her fox features were hidden by genjutsu. All in all, they looked stunning. When the girls saw Naruto staring at them, they grinned at one another and thought, mission make Naru-kun wowed beyond belief accomplished. They blushed when they heard his words. But he also looked pretty good, they had to admit. When Tenten waved her hand in front of Naruto's face, he snapped out of his awe and blushed upon realizing that he had been staring. Uneasy, he said, so should we get going? The girls nodded and exchanged glances. Akane grinned broadly and replied, yes. They then walked off the training field after joining their arms with his. 10 minutes later, Tenten was shocked and asked, Naruto-kun, how did you possibly get a reservation to this place? They were standing in front of the Golden Leaf, the most well-known restaurant in Konoha. It was a large establishment with 2 floors, the first of which was primarily used as a dance floor with a few dining tables surrounding it, and the second floor was used for dining alone with a fantastic view of the village. I have my ways, Ten-chan, I have my ways. Naruto simply grinned and said in a mysterious manner, I have my ways. He then led them into the restaurant and up to the reservation desk, where he said, reservation for Uzumaki. The waiter glanced at his book, then looked up and said, Uzumaki reservation for 3, come right this way. As they sat and left, the waiter handed them their menus and said, your server will be with you momentarily. With narrow eyes that Tenten mirrored and pointed straight at him, Akane said, okay, spill Naru-kun. How did you get reservations to this place? Before explaining, Naruto shivered a little and began to perspire a little under the eyes of both of his girlfriends. Well, you see, Akane-chan, I happen to know the owner, and he's one of the few that don't hate me, and he set me up with the reservation. Tenten and Akane exchanged a few glances before nodding their heads in agreement. When they looked at their menus, Naruto sighed with relief. Girls are scary, he thought, sweating, relieved that Akane had nothing to do with his thoughts once she was out of the seal. When he heard the server coming to the table, he looked up from his own menu. Hello, may I take your order? The happy girl asked. Tenten put her menu on the table and said, yes, I would like the gyoza, with a side of miso soup and some sencha green tea to drink. Akane put her menu down on Tenten's and said, some tempura, with a side of fried rice, and gyokuro tea to drink please. Naruto handed the server all of the menus and said, yakizakana, a side of yakisoba, with matcha tea for the drink. The waitress took note of their orders, nodded, and said, very well, your meals will be ready momentarily. She then turned to leave. So Naru-kun, Akane persuaded him to turn to face her. Tenten, who shared Akane's curiosity, pricked up when she asked, "How did you meet the owner?" "Well, I met Kagari-san when I was digging through the trash looking for food. He had been taking the trash out for the day and saw me. He didn't hate me, so he ended up feeding and sheltering me for the night. The next morning he took me to see the Hokage. Oddly enough, the next day I got my apartment. I repaid him with the occasional odd job here and there." Naruto paused before speaking, remembering how he encountered the man. Tenten and Akane, who had looked down at his reference to his past, could only think, "He looks like he's at peace right now." Akane thought, "Okay, I have got to meet this guy. To cause such a reaction from Naru-kun, he must be a really good person." Tenten agreed, stating that Naruto's small smile and the distant look in his eyes made him look at peace with the world. When their food and beverages arrived and were placed in front of them, they were startled out of their reverie. Before leaving, the cheerful server said, "Here are your meals. I hope you enjoy them." Given that Naruto and Tenten had known one another for years, the meal went by primarily as they got to know Akane better. They discovered that although she was initially the strongest of the tailed beasts, some of the others believed she couldn't handle the role. However, after she proved her strength, they were swiftly put in their proper place. Furthermore, it was nearly impossible for Mito and Kushina to sign summoning contracts that weren't related to them, which is largely why the Kitsune clan had never had a summoner until recently due to her being sealed for the previous 100 years or so. Tenten told Akane that she enjoyed all types of weapons and hoped to have used them all in the future. Additionally, she discovered that Tenten, like Naruto, aspired to marry and start a family one day. When she told Blonde that she hoped it was with him, Akane simply smirked and reminded her that she would be the one to get him first, further embarrassing him. Because they had already been sealed inside Naruto and had experienced most of his memories, not the bad ones, but the good ones, and because they had been with him for almost 14 years, counting before they returned in time, they simply wanted to know what he had planned to do this time. He described his plans, including rescuing Gigi, preventing Orochimaru from giving Sasuke the curse seal, and ideally preserving the person who had been his friend. "Why would you want to save that asshole? Especially after all he's done?" Tenten inquired. At the beginning, Naruto sighed and explained, "Tenten, when you stop and think about it, that was a Sasuke that doesn't exist yet, so if I can stop him from getting the curse mark, then I can stop him from defecting from the village." Tenten understood his meaning and agreed with his response, but not before offering her opinion. Her eyes were filled with worry, and Akane nodded in agreement. "Okay, I get that, Naru-kun, but if you can't, then please promise me that you'll kill him before everything gets out of hand again. I would hate to see all the hard work that we're putting into this go to waste." After giving them both a nod of approval, Naruto got up from his plate and extended his hands to them. When he asked, "Now that that is done, would either of you like to dance?" They both blushed but smiled and accepted his invitation, saying, "Yes, let's dance." They each grasped a hand. As he escorted them to the dance floor, Naruto grinned and asked himself, "How in the world did I get this lucky?" There was dancing and laughter for the remainder of the evening. A single butterfly was going about its own business in the serene Konoha forests. That is, until it was pursued around the clearing by a black mass that emerged from the bush. The creature had no idea that 3 genin and 1 jonin were observing it. The genin was there to capture it, while the jonin was there to observe the spectacle. Before a sluggish-sounding voice interrupted the static, the radio said, "Report on your positions around target." A voice said, "This is Raven, I'm in the bush to the right." A female voice said, "Cherry Blossoms, I'm behind the tree from the back." Another said, "Fox here, in the tree on the left." "All right, proceed with the mission." The 3 genin leapt into the clearing and made their way toward the momentarily stunned black mass, which turned out to be a cat with a ribbon tied to its right ear. After receiving the all clear, the cat immediately jumped onto the closest of the now exposed 3 genin of Team 7, which just so happened to be Sasuke, and began to claw his face off as soon as it realized what was happening. Flailing around in agony, the startled genin yelled, "Ah! Get this damn cat off me!" Since he had been the one scratched to hell on this mission the last time, Naruto nearly burst out laughing when he saw this. However, Akane was laughing uncontrollably in his mind, saying, "Ha ha ha, now this is what I call entertainment." Sakura yelled, "You dumb cat, get off my Sasuke-kun." As soon as she saw Sasuke in his current mauled state. To be honest, writing that made me feel like I was losing years of my life. She also jumped the cat from hell just as he leapt off Sasuke to meet her in midair. This is why one is to avoid getting fangirls, they're just too damn crazy, was the thought that was running through the minds of Naruto, Akane, Sasuke, who was still on the ground covered in scratches, and the distantly observing Kakashi as a dust cloud formed with fists, legs, paws, and the occasional tuft of hair or fur coming out of it. When Naruto noticed Sasuke's state, he went to help him up and asked, "You alright?" While extending his hand for the Uchiha to take. After a moment of staring at his hand, Sasuke took it and said, "Yeah, I'm alright. Just wish that we could have been teamed up with someone else other than her." He pointed to the cloud, from which loud shouts and hisses could now be heard, causing Naruto to nod and let out a dejected sigh. With a dejected sigh of his own, Sasuke said, "I know what you mean, out of all the people to have on our team it had to be a rabid fangirl." When Naruto said, "Though I do have an idea," Sasuke began to gaze at him curiously. With a contemplative expression that Sasuke mirrored, he said, "We could put these two into the underground fighting competitions. I bet we could make a killing." They exchanged a single glance before laughing. Sasuke had opened up more in the month since Naruto returned in time than he had during the first year they worked together, and he could genuinely say that he had his brother back in every way except blood. Akane had sensed someone was following them since the Rasen Shuriken incident, and the two of them had sent shadow clones to investigate who it was. They were surprised to find that it had been a purple-haired ice queen wearing a trench coat. This was known to Akane and proxy Tenten, but it was unknown to Naruto. This was because they had previously gotten together and sent Naruto away so they could have some girl time, also known as to plan who else was going to be in his harem. Additionally, Akane was strongly aroused every time Naruto removed his shirt during the few times the three of them were able to train covertly based on the scent that she inhaled. Because their pasts were similar, the two female time travelers knew they would get along well, but they were growing tired of stalking and wondered why Naruto hadn't noticed yet. They therefore made the decision to hold off on confronting her about the reason behind her stalking until the appropriate moment. Returning to the story, however, after Naruto had stopped laughing, he turned to Sasuke and asked, "Should we help her, or leave her be?" Sasuke also stopped laughing and turned to face the cloud that was now approaching them and was a bit too close for comfort. All he could say before they were both sucked into it and more fists, legs, and hair were flying around the cloud, with curses thrown here and there, was, "I don't think we have a choice." Sweat dropped when they were drawn into the cloud of violence, and Kakashi, who had been amazed that his two male genin had been getting along for the past month or so, leapt down to prevent them from suffering any more harm than they had already. To get the attention of the cat and the three genin, he coughed into his hand. They paused, and he was treated to the hilarious scene of Sasuke with a foot up to kick her and a hand pulling the cat's tail. Sakura biting him on the arm the cat was restrained in, and Naruto with the cat in a headlock and his fist raised to punch the cat's head. The three genin realized what they were doing and stood up, with the exception of Naruto, who continued to hold the cat by the scruff of its neck to keep it restrained, even though it was still thrashing around in an attempt to reach him. At the conclusion, Kakashi sighed. "Well, given that the target is restrained, mission capture Tora the cat. Complete, again." 10 minutes later. Now holding the cage containing Tora the cat's irate form, Sasuke said, "Kami, I hate this cat. Why can't we kill it?" As he sighed, Kakashi told his genin that although it was very tempting, they were unable to. When he recalled his time as a genin with this mission, he shivered and whispered, "Because Sasuke, that cat is the pet of the Fire Lord's wife, and seeing as the Fire Lord sends missions to Konoha, we can't kill it for fear of losing his favor, even if it is tempting." Having heard this before, Naruto simply ignored it and began speaking to Akane, asking, "So, Akane, why did you have me summon you and then run off without telling me anything?" He inquired, still perplexed as to why she had behaved in such a manner a few days prior. She rubbed the back of her head sheepishly, not letting him see, and said, "Oh, I had just realized that I was late meeting Ten-chan for some girl time is all." Despite his sigh, Naruto accepted it because he knew it would likely be the best he could get from her. "All right," he thought, "but something has been bothering me," which made Akane raise an eyebrow. "What? The three of us haven't been able to train together very much since the team placements, and since training ground 45 is still closed, how will we be able to train covertly once more? We can't simply enter the forest of death," he told her. "We'll think of something, Naruto-kun, and once we do, I'll start teaching you both some of my original jutsus. Since you both started making your own, both you and Tenten now have a good arsenal of well-known and original techniques," she said in a way that almost caused Naruto to trip. They were quite eager to learn some of Akane's original moves, which she had mentioned she would teach them for a while. "What lessons will you impart to us? Is it truly awesome?" Akane giggled into her hand as he asked excitedly, "You'll see, Naru-kun, but you're at the mission assignment room." Naruto jerked his head up to realize that they were, in fact, just outside the room where they received missions. His teammates gave him a strange look when he sighed once more. "You okay, Naruto? You look like you zoned out for a while." Kakashi inquired, a little concerned for his sensei's son. Kakashi nodded and returned to his book. Sasuke raised an eyebrow, and Sakura humped and turned away as Naruto simply nodded and rubbed the back of his head in a sheepish manner. "Yeah, I'm fine, sensei. Just been thinking on a few techniques I'm trying to improve, and I guess that I just got lost in my thoughts." Despite nodding, Kakashi couldn't help but wonder what skills Naruto was hoping to hone. He thought, could that technique that looked like a shuriken have been him? And his eyes widened in shock. Despite his desire to finish the Rasengan, Sensei was unable to incorporate his affinity into it. Given that it was clearly made of wind, Naruto should have Jonin-level skill and nature manipulation if that was him. He kept his gaze on Naruto, who had moved ahead of him to open the door to the mission room, and thought, for now, it's just speculation. I'll have to check these guys' affinities later. "This is it," Naruto said, hesitating a little as he opened the door. "It's time to confront Gigi." He thought anxiously, I hope I can act up in front of him. He saw the man who had been like a grandfather to him sitting behind his desk as soon as he opened the door, and his eyes began to well up with tears. Naruto entered the room and stood next to the other members of the team, quickly gathering his thoughts. After seeing how Naruto entered the room, Kakashi froze for a moment and put it away for later. He then approached his team and stood beside them, saying idly with his nose in his book, "Mission. Capture Tora the cat. Complete, Hokage-sama." The elderly Kage groaned at Kakashi's slack posture but grinned at his new appearance and surrogate grandson. He appears to be taking things seriously at this point, particularly after he threw away the jumpsuit. He began by addressing the team before turning to face the terrified Chunin next to him, who jerked to attention. "Very good, Team 7, you broke the old record of 3 hours and 50 minutes, and brought it to 2 hours and 14 minutes. Now, Iruka," he said. At the end, he whispered, "Would you mind informing the client that her cat has been found, again?" Which made everyone in the room start to perspire. How long has this cat actually lived? The general belief was that everyone in the room, including the Hokage, had unpleasant memories of the mission to capture Tora. Iruka replied, "Yes, Hokage-sama." He got up and left the room to tell the Fire Lord's wife, but as soon as he did, he heard a loud cry of, "Tora!" And the door nearly fell off its hinges when a fat, large woman ran in, took the cage from the table where Sasuke had placed it, grabbed Tora, and crushed the yowling cat into her bosom. While screeching at the top of its lungs, the cat was attempting to claw her way out of its owner's overly affectionate, or so she believed, grip, pleading with someone to save it. When the genin saw this, their thoughts diverged from Tora's suffering. "Yes, squeeze that thing," were Sasuke's thoughts, and he accompanied them with an evil expression and a wild laugh. Looking empathetically at Tora, Naruto thought, even though I despise that cat, someone shouldn't be doing that. Even though he didn't like the cat, he wouldn't harm it in that way. Do you even need to speculate as to what was going through Sakura's mind when she said, "I wonder if Sasuke-kun would like." As he rummaged through the D-rank pile on his desk, the Hokage addressed Team 7 after the Fire Lord's wife had left. "If you feel like you can take more missions, we have dog walking, babysitting, fence painting, or Tora, come back. Catching the cat again," he said, dripping sweat. Knowing that at least 2 members of his team were prepared for a C-rank mission, Kakashi said, "Actually, Hokage-sama, I believe my team is ready for a C-rank mission." He also unintentionally prevented Naruto from bribing the Hokage with the secret of defeating paperwork to obtain it. "Are you sure, Kakashi? I know that your team has taken the required number of D ranks, but they did graduate just under a month ago," Sarutobi said after glancing at the Jonin. "Yes, Hokage-sama, I believe that they are ready to have a low C rank at the very least," he replied. Sarutobi turned his attention to the group of people gathered on the side of the room. Sakura was looking at Sasuke while Naruto and Sasuke conversed quietly in the corner. At least 2 of them appeared prepared for it, though. Sakura doesn't, though, he thought before nodding his head. "All right, I'll let it happen, but I would like to talk to you later." Kakashi nodded in agreement. List Iruka's doubts about the choice to send Team 7. "Could you send Tazuna in?" Sarutobi asked, turning back to Iruka. Iruka nodded, walked out of the room, and returned a moment later carrying an elderly man who had a strong alcoholic odor. "I asked for a team to protect me, not for a bunch of kids," the man snorted as he glanced at the now standing attention team. Sakura tried to punch him, but Kakashi stopped her by bending down and whispering in her ear, "You know, Sakura, We can't go around killing our clients. It's bad for business. The one with the blonde hair and the one in blue look okay, but the pink one looks like something that not even a dead thing would eat. Tazuna-san, I am a jonin, so I'll be able to handle anything that my students can't. Just so you know, the boys of my team are among the most skilled in the village, so there should be no worries. After she grudgingly nodded, he got up and said to Tazuna, very well, we'll leave in the morning, meet at the north gate at 8 a.m. Following Kakashi's assurance, Tazuna waved his team out the door after Kakashi said, sharp. Naruto said, I'll see you guys later, I've got someone to meet. However, Sasuke stopped him before he could go, placing a hand on his shoulder. He said, hold up Naruto. The blonde gave him an inquisitive look. Naruto realized what he wanted when Sasuke said, you're always saying you've got someone to meet after training, but we don't even know who this person is. Don't you also want to meet her? Sasuke nodded when he asked. With a sigh, Naruto took hold of his arm and turned away from a perplexed Sakura. Back in the office of the Hokage, before speaking, Sarutobi displayed a silencing seal after confirming that the genin had left. Want to explain why you would request a C rank when there is clearly a genin on your team that is not ready for one? He asked. I'm hoping that if she sees what the real world is like, she might start to take being a shinobi seriously. Kakashi sighed in response to his question. Sarutobi's eyes widened when he heard Kakashi's alternative. He wouldn't send even his most vile adversary to train with Might Guy for a whole month. Because if she doesn't, then I'm seriously thinking of dropping her from my team, or if not, then having Guy train her for a month, he explained. Do you not believe that Guy's training would be too much for Kakashi to handle? The elderly Kage inquired uneasily. Before his head fell into a deep depression, Kakashi simply shook his head negatively, saying, if it would help get the point that this is not a game across, then no, honestly, Hokage-sama, I've tried everything I can think of to get her out of her fangirl phase, but nothing's worked. His tone was somber that the old Kage felt sorry for him. I can appreciate that, Kakashi, but what about reaching an agreement? What I'm offering is to send a Tokubetsu Jonin with you to help out in case things don't go as planned, he said, causing Kakashi's head to snap up to look at him. Kakashi considered the situation. On the plus side, he would have someone extra to help with his team's genin and possibly with any missing nin that came along, as slim as it would be. Oh, if only he knew. But on the minus side, he would have someone else to watch out for in case things get difficult. He gave the old leader a nod of approval, recognizing that the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. Kakashi didn't particularly dislike her, but he had heard of her tendencies both during and after missions, and he would have preferred to have someone else on the mission with them. Very well then, Anko Mitarashi will meet you at the gate tomorrow at 8. The Hokage said, causing Kakashi's eyes to widen at the name. Are you certain you're sending Hokage-sama, of all people, Anko? Kakashi asked shakily, and the elderly leader laughed. Yes, Kakashi. I am positive that she can help Sakura get over her fangirl phase, and it appears that she has shown a special interest in one of your students, the leader said. With a perverted giggle at the end, he said, namely Naruto. Kakashi's eyes widened even more after learning the information. The old Kage nodded his head in agreement when Kakashi said, I don't know whether I should be jealous or scared for his chastity. He then dispatched an Anbu to let Anko know that she would be accompanying them on this mission. With Naruto and Sasuke 5 minutes prior, 2 blocks from their starting point, Naruto released a dazed Sasuke who was clutching his head and appeared to be about to throw up. It'll clear up in a minute, Naruto said, laughing at his friend's current state. When Sasuke appeared slightly irritated, he said, you could have warned me you were going to do that. This made Naruto laugh once more. Yeah, but what fun is that? So where is this friend of yours that you mentioned you were meeting? He asked, causing Sasuke to roll his eyes in frustration before he turned to look where they were. His eyebrows went up as he asked. Oh, we're not meeting her here, Naruto said with a small smile before beginning to move. He said, I just wanted to get away from Sakura. Sasuke sighed and nodded his head before realizing what he was saying. You mentioned that the person you were meeting was a girl, so does that imply that you have a girlfriend? With a playful smile, he inquired. Naruto remained silent and carried on walking. Sasuke's eyes widened in shock at Naruto's silence, saying, no way. You have a girlfriend, really? He said, equally incredulous. Yes, I do, and if you don't mind, we're trying to keep it secret until after the Chunin exams this year, so please don't go blabbing it. Naruto turned his head in his direction and sighed in defeat. When they arrived on a training field and saw Tenten waiting for them, Sasuke nodded his head in agreement that he could understand the value of keeping something secret and that the glare he was receiving was a good incentive because it promised him a lot of pain if he didn't keep this to himself. I can do that, he said. Just before 8 o'clock in the morning, Anko Mitarashi was standing in front of Konoha's north gate. Normally, she wouldn't be caught dead doing anything lower than a B rank, but this time, she was almost too happy to accept it because she would finally get some answers from a certain blonde-haired genin. The first was, how was he so powerful? And the second was, how was he able to pull off a jutsu that was so powerful that it was felt, heard, and seen throughout the village? She could recall what she had seen to raise these questions. Flashback. On her way back to the Forest of Death after lunch, Anko remarked, that was some good dango. She was about to turn toward the forest when she heard a shout in the distance that said, summoning jutsu. And she made the decision to find out who was training so near her forest. She could easily identify the two teenagers because one of them was the village's Jinchuriki, and she had seen the other helping out around the weapons store she often visited. The woman and the blonde appeared to be attempting to persuade the girl to sign a summoning contract of some sort. Focusing on the conversation a little more, Anko thought, that's odd, there aren't that many summoning contracts around. I wonder what one it is. There's a Fox clan. And not only that but the other person here is the Kyuubi. Just how did it get free? And just what the hell is Sage Mode? She asked, puzzled and worried. Those aren't the hand signs for the jutsu, so what are they trying to pull? She thought as she watched them persuade the panda-haired girl to sign it. Then they showed her a bizarre series of hand seals, and she was shocked when the girl tried the jutsu using the various hand signs. Even more shocking to her was what the girl called forth, AF Fox. She thought in alarm, and when the little fox called the red-headed creature Kyuubi-sama, she became even more alarmed as her suspicions were confirmed. I have to warn Hokage-sama, she thought, turning to leave before hearing about trying out Sage Mode and a jutsu she had never heard of before, which made Anko's curiosity get the better of her. What's the Rasen Shuriken? She asked herself as she watched the blonde sit to meditate. Anko's thoughts drifted off when she noticed that the blonde's appearance had changed from normal to more feral. Okay, that's hot, she thought, blushing a little at his appearance. She became very excited when he stood up and declared that he would try this Rasen Shuriken thing. She did, however, raise an eyebrow when he called forth a couple of shadow clowns and extended his hand to them, causing them to wave their own over it. That is, until she noticed the jutsu forming and emitting a loud screech that sounded like a bell. Undoubtedly, Anko was unable to inform the Hokage of her discovery and was only able to gaze in awe at what she was now witnessing and the subsequent events. Flashback end. She had been following the three around whenever she could for the entire month. She found out that all three were dating. She wasn't sure why, but the idea made her a little envious. She also learned that the two teenagers could summon the Kyuubi, or Akane as she liked to be called, at any time, that they both had 4 affinities, and that they both had enough chakra to create hundreds of shadow clones at once. For some reason, she felt hot under the collar whenever Naruto removed his shirt when he became too sweaty, but she wasn't complaining because he was well on his way to becoming a well but not overly muscular young man. Damn it girl, you're off track, focus, she thought, blushing as her previous thoughts were about to go straight to the gutter. She wiped a little drool from her chin. She had frequently found herself nodding off in those moments, thinking about what it would be like to be held in those powerful arms of his and feel those chest muscles of his on her. Anko still hadn't told the Hokage what she had witnessed that day, and she wasn't sure why. She simply assumed that they were concealing their power for a reason, and she didn't elaborate. With a frustrated sigh, she looked up to see the target of her annoyance walking toward the gate, thoughtfully studying a scroll. With Naruto at the moment, Naruto looked at a seal he had designed and thought, well, if I put this there and move that over here, it should be able to work right. Though Akane, who was well versed in seals, had pointed out that what he had designed would create multiple copies of a shadow clone's knowledge and overload his brain, the good news was that he had gotten most of it right, just not the part that would transfer the memory to his muscles. Naruto, who never wastes an opportunity, had another idea for the seal he had made, too. The seal's proposal was to make a shadow clone transfer muscle memory rather than knowledge when it dispelled, 1. However, he was currently working on perfecting it so that he could use it without putting Tenten or himself in danger. Not quiet, Naru-kun. Do you notice the symbol there next to the kanji? She referred to a section immediately adjacent to the seal's main body when she asked. She rubbed her eyes as Naruto said, yeah, what about it? She sent an image of what he needed to do into his mind, saying, you need to move that over to the center of the seal and replace it with that one there. When he saw the picture that Akane had sent him, Naruto's eyes widened and he exclaimed, Now I get it, Akane-chan. So when I move it there, adjust this, and move that there, done. Akane smirked a little but rubbed her ringing ears. When he reached the gate, Naruto looked up to see that he wasn't alone and that the only person who had scared him but made him want more of it was the one who was standing there, staring at him with a mix of curiosity and hunger. When he recalled the last time he had seen her, he shuddered. It was a frightening and somewhat enjoyable encounter that he would prefer not to discuss. When his collar abruptly lifted him into the air and held him right in front of her face, he yelled. "What's going on, you He asked uneasily. "You will respond to the questions I pose to you, Gaki. Understand?" The tone of the voice was so intimidating that there was no room for debate, but it was more of a demand than a question. Anko was about to ask what she wanted when a slack voice said, "You know, Anko-san, you threatening my student is making me rethink the decision the Hokage made about you joining us on this mission." Naruto nodded his head more quickly than one could say, "Ramen," to indicate that he was paying attention. When they looked around, they saw Sakura, Sasuke, Tazuna, and Kakashi, who was buried in his book, laughingly staring at them. "Sorry about that, Kakashi. I just had a question to ask and wanted to make sure he answered it." Anko put Naruto down, grinning sheepishly, and scratched her cheek. "And you had to threaten him, me?" was the thought that made everyone in the room perspire. At this point, Kakashi said something that Naruto understood. "Kakashi-sensei, what do you mean that she's joining us? How did this happen? This didn't happen last time," he asked, panicking inside. "Well, the Hokage thought that it would be better to have some backup on this mission in case things got though." Kakashi, who was unaware of his students' thoughts, responded as he led them all out of the gate, noting Tazuna's flinch as he finished. Having noticed it, Anko simply shrugged her shoulders and said in a bored tone, It's not like I could turn it down seeing as it was a direct order from Hokage-sama." As she said this, she glanced at the blonde genin, which made it obvious that, "We're not done here. Sorry Ten-chan, but if this goes on for much longer I'm going to have to confront her on my own," Akane thought, causing said blonde to shiver and growl to herself. After an hour, for the group of 6, the last hour had gone by rather quickly. Sakura had either spent it staring at Sasuke or asking him questions about Wave and its military, and Sasuke had listened to the answers because he was also interested while attempting to avoid killing a particular pinkette. While Tazuna had been downing bottle after bottle of sake, the two adult shinobi had spent it answering their questions and keeping an eye out for bandits, and Naruto had spent it reviewing the previous encounter, discussing how to deal with the approaching demon brothers, and discussing how he might be able to save Haku and Zabuza. He looked up just as they reached the road where the demon brothers were going to ambush them and noticed the puddle a short distance ahead. As he subtly indicated to Sasuke and the two Jonin that something was wrong, he thought, "Okay, this is it. Stay composed and stay focused." The Jonin simply kept their eyes forward and nodded with Sasuke, as they already knew having sensed it as soon as they turned on the path. Good detection skills, though given the performance he gave on the bell test it should have been expected, Kakashi thought. Sasuke showed no signs of reaction other than nodding ever so slightly at him. Even though she didn't know why, Anko growled at the girlfriend's thought, this Gaki's training with his little girlfriends is paying off. With an inward smirk, Naruto thought, I suppose I could try out one of the new jutsu we've made, Ehaka-chan? With a smirk of her own, she said, I think it's about time to finally see what some of them can do in a real battle, so yes you should. As they passed it, two individuals wearing dark cloaks emerged with metal claws and a long chain connecting them. They wrapped the chain around the two Jonin in the group and pulled, as if tearing them apart. Sensei Kakashi. Sakura let out a startled cry. Two down, said one of Mizu's brothers. As they turned to face the three genin who had gathered in a protective formation around Tazuna, the other Gozu yelled, 4 to go, and charged at them, their claws up to strike. Both Sasuke and Naruto reacted at the same time, with Sasuke using a kunai to strike a tree after catching the chain that bound the brothers together and Naruto creating a shadow clone. Both of them then charged at one of the brothers, taking advantage of their shocked states. In response, the brothers severed the chain to fight independently and confronted the original and clone directly. The fight of the original, when the real Naruto and Mizu first met, he threw a punch that was intended for the rogue's face, but it was quickly sidestepped and countered by a claw swipe. Naruto leapt back, began a series of hand signals, and exclaimed, Fire style! Fireball jutsu! And launched a huge ball of fire in Mizu's direction. Mizu was about to sidestep, but instead he leapt into a punch from a clone that Naruto had created and sent right before he launched the fireball. The now two blondes gave him a cheeky smile as he rubbed the area of his chest where it had impacted, muttering, "Damn brat." Now that he was well, he performed his own hand signals, which stopped the now charged Naruto's when he called out his jutsu, water style, water wall, and sent forth a giant wall of water at the now somewhat shocked Naruto. Okay, this defiantly didn't happen last time, he thought as he and the clone went through their own signs, wind style, pushing force. They both yelled, releasing two distinct, swift air currents from their mouths that joined to form a single, incredibly swift air current that struck the approaching water wall. Maizu smirked when he saw the now lone air current and thought, this kid must be kidding. That jutsu isn't as powerful as mine. However, he was taken aback by what transpired next. He had been expecting what appeared to be a C-ranked jutsu to fall to his B-ranked one, but instead it broke through his and took his with it. His world went dark as he was about to get up when he heard a voice next to his ear say, "Sorry, buddy, but you lose." What the hell, how is that possible? No jutsu can make another rebound onto the user, he thought, shocked and helpless as his own jutsu returned and collided with him, sending him straight into a tree. The clone's battle. The clone immediately avoided a blow that would have dispelled it as it faced Gozu head-on. Leaping back, it chose to use ninjutsu and swiftly went over hand signals, saying, "Lightning style. Wave of inspiration." Gozu would have avoided the lightning wave that the jutsu sent at him if he had sensed something holding him down. He was shocked to see another clone behind him. He smirked when the clone that had been holding him and the one he had switched with puffed away. The clone made a clone? He thought as he struggled to break free and somehow managed to free his clawed hand, with which he made a one-hand sign and replaced himself with the clone. He jumped away just before the jutsu hit them both. He looked down and saw a pair of hands holding him in place, but that smirk vanished as soon as he felt something grab hold of his feet. He looked up when he heard someone yell, "Wind style." Great breakthrough. When he saw the enormous gust of wind coming toward him, his eyes widened, and he was hurled toward the same tree that his brother had struck just moments earlier. He saw the clone he had been fighting vanish just before he passed out, and he heard the same thing his brother had. Returning to the normal viewpoint, Naruto turned back to the others, who were staring at him as if he had grown a second head, after the fights were over and his clone had vanquished him. What? His eyebrows went up as he asked. The other two members of the team snapped out of their funk after he said that. How can you defeat two adversary ninjas by yourself? Doing that is what a lot of hard training and a hell of a lot of luck can do, Naruto said, causing perspiration to fall on everyone's heads as Sasuke asked in a startled and stuttering voice. Sakura, however, appeared to notice something. "Oh no," she cried out, "what are we going to do without Kakashi and Anko-sensei?" Naruto and Sasuke exchanged a disbelieving glance before Naruto turned to face the forest and said, "Okay, you two, you can come out now." Sakura and Tazuna gave him a confused look that soon turned to astonished relief when they saw Kakashi and Anko emerge from the forest. Sasuke was a little annoyed that their senseis had feigned death just to do that, even though he knew they were testing them. "Would you mind telling us why you left us to protect ourselves?" Sasuke inquired in a displeased tone. "Well, we wanted to see if you were capable of protecting the client on your own, and if you could fend off a surprise attack," Kakashi replied. "And it's clear to me that at least two of you are," said Anko. "However, I must ask, where did you find Naruto's wind jutsu?" Naruto merely stared at Kakashi as he asked, drawing perplexed looks from two of the genin. "Kakashi-sensei, what jutsu would that be?" Everyone, including Kakashi, started to perspire when he asked. Kakashi nodded when Anko remarked, "I believe he refers to the one you used to push back that guy's water jutsu with, pushing force I believe it was called. He had made it during the few times she had been out on missions and hadn't been able to spy on his training, so even though she had been watching him during the past month when she didn't have any missions, she hadn't seen him use that jutsu at all and she wouldn't have." They widened their eyes in shock when Naruto said, "I didn't get it from anywhere because I made it myself." They had never seen a genin create their own jutsu before, but now they were there and had just seen one in action. Kakashi said, "Okay, we'll get back to this later, because I do believe that we have two Chunin-level missing nin to interrogate." Anko's face contorted into a malevolent grin that made everyone shudder. "I get to play with some new toys, yay." As she approached the two unconscious and now restrained brothers, she laughed in a spooky yet innocent tone. She easily began dragging them to the forest once she got there, but before she went inside, she turned to the others and told them not to bother checking if they were screaming. "I'm just playing with these new toys of mine," she said, maintaining her previous tone. She then proceeded directly into the nearby forest, where the screams began almost instantly. The horrors she was inflicting on the two renegade nin were beyond the comprehension of the others. Kakashi turned to Tazuna shortly after the screams began and began questioning him, saying in a tone of voice that two of the genin had never heard him use. "Okay, Tazuna-san, start talking." Now that he was nervous, Tazuna tried to act innocent by saying, "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't try playing the fool, Tazuna. Those two, who happen to be high C, low B rank missing nin, were after you. Now when you signed on for protection you said that all it would involve was bandits and wild animals." Kakashi glared at the individual. "All right, you got me. The truth is," Tazuna sighed upon realizing he had been caught. "Play everything from the anime until they make a decision. So let me see if I got this right," Kakashi said, placing his hand shin high. "Gato, one of the richest men in the world, has taken over your country and has been bleeding it dry." Kakashi began to nod. "You have been building a bridge to bring the economy back to wave while at the same time breaking Gato's hold over the country, and to prevent you from finishing this bridge he has sent missing nin after you," he concluded, and Tazuna nodded. The screams ceased as he opened his mouth to speak again, and Anko emerged from the forest wearing a slight frown. Kakashi nodded, and Tazuna looked offended by the old man's remark as she explained her findings, sighing as she saw the rest of the group staring at her. "Well, as you've probably guessed, they were hired by Gato to go after the old man. However," she added, "they were working with someone else. They're working with Zabuza Momochi and his apprentice." Kakashi frowned as she concluded, drawing wide eyes from the team's resident sensei. Curious about who they were facing, Sasuke asked, "Who's Zabuza Momochi?" and got the two Jonin's attention. Zabuza Momochi is an A-ranked missing nin from Kirigakure. Kakashi sighed as he turned to face his team. Naruto's eyes widened as he had to maintain appearances. Since she wasn't in charge of the mission, Kakashi was technically unable to say or do anything, so Anko asked, "Now what are we going to do?" If what she had been told by the Demon Brothers about Gato and his tactics were accurate, she would personally like to go and take him out. After giving it some thought, Kakashi turned to the genin and said, "I think we should let them decide." This caused Anko to look at him suspiciously, Sakura to look concerned, and Naruto and Sasuke to smirk. Anko questioned, "Are you sure that is a wise thing to do, Kakashi?" Despite her sadistic tendencies, she had morals, and one of them was to avoid endangering children, whether they were genin or not. He said, "Actually, it is." She raised an eyebrow at him in inquiry. Anko raised another eyebrow at him when he said, "While it is true that they are still green genin, they have to start making decisions on their own as well, in case they are ever chosen to lead a mission in the future." Despite this, she nodded in agreement. "Now," said Kakashi, turning to face the group, "what do you all think we should do?" When asked this question, Naruto turned to face Sasuke, and the two of them knew what the other was thinking. They would assist the wave people in one way or another. Tazuna gave him a grateful look as Naruto turned back to his sensei and spoke first. "Well, I'm defiantly saying that we go for it, because I don't know about you two," he said, referring to the Jonin, "but I can't stand people who can do things like that to others, just for their own sick pleasure." Turning to face the other male member of his team, Kakashi said, "I'm with Naruto on this one." Kakashi gave nod. His gaze now turned to the team's female member, Sakura, who had initially opposed the idea of carrying out the mission but instantly changed her mind when Sasuke spoke, gave him a positive response. Anko and Kakashi both started to perspire when they noticed Sakura's shift in perspective. The former thought, "Well, I can see why Hokage-sama wanted me to come along. Obviously he thinks I can beat the fangirl out of her. Oh, goody. I love breaking them." The sweat drop was the starting point, but the final grin made Kakashi reconsider allowing her to accompany him on this mission. After deciding to stop thinking about what Anko might do to end Sakura's fangirl phase, Kakashi said, "Well then I guess we go on," and began to move. 2 hours later, nearly everyone was walking alongside the boat, but we found everyone sitting in the boat that was transporting them to the island that was being waved. With the exception of the soft trickle of water, everything was extremely quiet, and the fog that shrouded them prevented them from seeing anything. Sasuke was looking straight ahead, but if you looked closely, you could see that his eyes were darting around every half minute and his ears were twitching with every sound. Kakashi and Anko, who were seated in the back, were keeping their scenes on full alert. Sakura, is guessing really necessary? Naruto was concerned. Although he was aware of the attack's timing and location, Zabuza still had the option to alter the plan. Because the Demon Brothers had stayed with Taijutsu the last time, he was aware that that could have happened. They had employed ninjutsu this time. How did this occur? Unaware that his chakra began to spike and attract the attention of the two Jonin, he thought, the only thing that they did that was the same was the genjutsu and going after the Jonin of the team first. What's wrong, Naruto? Kakashi asked, snapping Naruto out of his thoughts. Huh? Your chakra began to spike, and you had a worried expression on your face. Everything alright? He asked, turning to face his sensei. Kakashi got up and left the boat to walk alongside his sensei's son, drawing everyone's attention to them. He asked as he fell into a step next to him. Anko gave him a doubtful look, not that they noticed, and Kakashi nodded as Naruto's eyes widened and he quickly made up a lie, saying, well, I'm just a little worried as to how we're going to deal with Zabuza is all. Kakashi said, don't worry about him, Anko and I will handle it. Naruto disagreed, saying, I'm not worried about that sensei. I know that you both can handle him. What worries me is whether or not he changed the plan of attack. Anko continued to be skeptical of the time-traveling genin, knowing that he could defeat Zabuza with his level of skill. Okay, what's he playing at? It's like he knows what's going to happen, she thought, recalling some of the brief conversations she had overheard while following them. It wasn't much, but she had heard that they had planned to change something and prevent a war, whatever that meant. The fact that he had seen the genjutsu when the academy report stated that he had no clue on the subject didn't help her thoughts. How much does she know? Sigh, looks like I'll have to talk to her on my own. Sorry, Ten-chan. Akane thought as she considered her options, growing increasingly suspicious of Anko and her knowledge of their plans. They could see the shore through the fog just as Kakashi opened his mouth to speak. As he and Naruto stepped onto the shore and waited for everyone to disembark from the boat, he said, we can worry about Zabuza when the time comes, but for now, we wait. As the boat returned to the mainland, Kakashi said, all right, everyone. Since we're now in enemy territory, we'll be moving around Tazuna-san in a diamond formation. He explained, receiving nods from the group as they started to move toward Wave once more. Naruto will be in the front guarding for frontal attacks. Sakura will be on the left. Sasuke, you're on the right. And Anko and I will bring up the rear, keeping a lookout for anything that gets through your defenses. After a few minutes, Naruto heard something in the bushes and responded by hurling a kunai at it, shocking everyone and making them defensive. With his eyes narrowed in suspicion, Naruto moved the branches out of the way and walked over to the bush. He was sweating when he saw that a rabbit had attacked him again. This time, the rabbit was sprawled against a tree, its ears spread wide apart, and its eyes were so wide that it was making a funny sound. Oh come on, I did it again, he thought, hearing Akane chuckle to herself when she saw the unfortunate creature. But the two Jonin were thinking, white fur? It's the middle of summer, the rabbit's fur should be brown, not white. That means that it was raised inside. Their faces then took on a look of concerned realization. It must have been used as a substitution. They thought as they moved covertly to defensive positions around the team. The others all relaxed and sighed in relief when they saw it. When Sakura saw the bunny, she yelled, Naruto Baka, you could have killed the poor thing. The word, tried, is important here because as soon as she raised her fist, Naruto heard metal slicing through the air and pushed her and Sasuke to the ground, yelling, get down. A sword was flying toward them, and he leapt to avoid it. Each Jonin took Tazuna's side and pushed him down with them after hearing it in Naruto's warning. A loud thunk was heard as the enormous sword struck and became lodged in a tree. When they heard a voice muse, they turned to see a man wearing only light blue Jonin pants, camouflage arm and leg warmers, and a sword strap across his bare chest. So they sent a team of brats to guard the bridge builder then? They asked. His face was obscured by the bandages he was wearing as a mask while standing on the handle of his sword, and the headband that identified him as Akira missing nin was strapped diagonally across his forehead. Demon of the Hidden Mist, Zabuza Momochi was the one who was hired to murder Tazuna. Though I'm a little surprised they sent not only Kakashi of the Sharingan, but Konoha's snake mistress Anko Mitarashi as well, he continued. As they assumed fighting positions, Kakashi and Anko glared at the missing nin. Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura. Guard the client, Kakashi said, keeping his eyes fixed on the enemy. When Zabuza heard the orders Kakashi gave his team, he laughed and asked, do you really think that it will help? Before jumping down and drawing his sword from the tree. He turned to Anko and said, let me handle this for now. Join in when you see an opening. Anko nodded, and the two men vanished in a flash of speed. Kakashi shrugged, adding, one can hope. The purple-haired Jonin remained poised, waiting for an opportunity to seize. The target kunai was surrounded by the 3 genin in a diamond formation, ready to be pursued by the missing nin. For 2 of them, watching the jonin fight was a blur. All they saw was the jonin moving into and out of view. When Sasuke heard the blows colliding and sending tiny shockwaves out, he thought, so this is what a real jonin battle is like. I can't see anything, but by the sounds, it's intense. Is this a ninja fight? What if he is unbeatable by Kakashi-sensei? I'm sure Sasuke-kun can, though, Sakura thought, alternating between worry and fear before pondering what might occur if the last scenario materialized. As he approaches a wall and strikes his head against it, the author asks, seriously, why did Kishimoto have to invent her? In an attempt to understand why Kishimoto would bring the curse of Sakura down on humanity. However, Naruto was able to see what was going on thanks to a combination of years of experience and having his vision improved after traveling back in time. Thank you again for the enhanced senses, Akane-chan, he said to his girlfriend, Tenten. Even though they were a bitch to get used to at first, they sure help out when I need them. Akane chuckled a little as she recalled how, one morning, when he had woken up, the sunlight had blinded his vision. His sense of smell had gotten so bad that he could smell the trash outside, and his hearing was poor. In summary, it hadn't been a good few days for him. Particularly when Tenten had come to look for him and discovered him huddled in his apartment's back room, with 3 earplugs in each ear, a roll of tissue paper jammed up each nostril, and no lights on. Not nice again. But let's get back to the main events. I expected more out of Konoha's famous Sharingan using ninja, Kakashi. Zabuza said in a slightly disappointed voice as he reappeared in the same spot where he had been standing, barely panting at all. Naruto turned to see Kakashi stop in front of the group, panting heavily. When he began a series of hand seals, Zabuza laughed. I guess Konoha nin aren't as good as people say, hidden mist jutsu. He exclaimed after finishing them, holding one hand in a tiger seal above his head and the other in front of his chest. They were surrounded by an even thicker mist than before, making it nearly impossible to see through. Trust me, Zabuza, you haven't seen anything yet. Pulling his headband off his eye, Kakashi revealed a blood-red eye with black dots surrounding the pupil. He shook his head and reached for his headband. Oh, so you finally reveal the Sharingan, the legendary dojutsu of the Uchiha clan, Kakashi? Zabuza asked, his laughter now turning into a deranged laugh, as he laughed once more, his voice coming from all directions at once. A pressure so intense that it nearly knocked 2 of the genin off their feet was the next thing they knew. This intent to kill, it surpasses Itachi's. As he shakily raised the kunai in his hand to his throat, Sasuke thought, I feel like I want to kill myself to escape it. Naruto yelled, Sasuke, grabbing everyone's attention. After saying, neither Kakashi nor Anko-sensei will let him kill any of us, Naruto's expression abruptly changed to a cunning grin. Everyone looked at him in confusion as he said, besides I think I'll clear the air around here. After focusing his chakra around his body and shaping it into wind, a tremendous gust of wind blew through the area, clearing the mist. The blonde in the group was gaping at Zabuza, who was a few feet away from the genin, in disbelief. The same could be said for the others. He asked in a startled tone, how do you have enough chakra to do that? He felt a sharp pain in his back as a voice behind him said, it doesn't matter how he did it, because now you're dead. After she said this, Anko, who had seized the opportunity to position himself behind Zabuza, stabbed him in the back with a kunai. Only to discover that water, not blood, was oozing from the wound, and Zabuza's body splattered onto the ground as a mere pool of the substance. Water clone. She thought aloud as she leapt to the side to avoid being slashed by Zabuza's sword and landed next to Kakashi. Konoha. Tenten worked on her aim, letting out a rather sorrowful sigh. It wasn't necessary. As she released the kunai, it struck the target squarely in the middle. I hope Naruto-kun and Akane-chan are okay, she thought. She was worried about her boyfriend because Team 7 had already left several hours ago. Even though she was aware that he could manage himself, her worry for him continued to grow. Tenten was just about to release another kunai when she heard 2 loud voices exclaim, made it. Lee and Guy then skidded into the clearing. Lee. Guy said, turning to face Lee with a serious expression. When he said, it's obvious to me that you need to improve your training. You were able to keep up with me the last time we raced, but this time you were trailing by 3 inches. His clone gasped and saluted him. Lee exclaimed, his eyes blazing with a bright fire, yes Guy-sensei. I will up my training WIEGHTS, so that my flames of youth will burn as bright as yours. That's the way to go Lee, Guy-sensei, Lee. Guy-sensei, Lee. Oh, No, no, Tenten thought as he swiftly turned away from the green couple, who were now embracing passionately, fortunately before the worst could happen. However, her other teammate was not as fortunate, as he decided to enter the training area this time to observe what many have come to refer to as the sunset of youth, genjutsu. After the green pair's yelling had ceased, Tenten turned around to find Neji curled into a tiny ball, muttering, "So much youth. Make it stop, mommy. Make it stop," while sucking his thumb. She returned to her training dummies after letting out a sigh and shaking her head. Land of Waves. Naruto looked down at the sleeping Jonin and said, "You know, Kakashi-sensei, you didn't have to go overboard with the Sharingan." Said Jonin looked up at his genin and grinned sheepishly. "Yeah, but he was stronger than I thought he would be." "That's what he said last time too," Naruto sighed and shook his head, thinking as he heard Akane chuckle. He turned to face Anko, who was tending to a bruised side and a sprained ankle while seated in a chair by the window. With the exception of Anko suffering a severe blow to the side of her ribs and spraining her ankle when she struck a tree, the fight had proceeded fairly similarly to how it had started. Following that, Kakashi had followed his previous course of action. By using the Sharingan to give Zabuza the impression that he could see into the future, he was able to get under his skin and then use the same water jutsu that he had previously used to blast him. At that point, Haku had put him in a death-like state and removed Zabuza's body, while wearing her fictitious hunter nin disguise. Naruto let out another sigh. Things were beginning to spiral out of control. He called out to his teammates, "Guys, we need to start training." As the sun rose in the land of waves, there was silence in the early morning. The forest animals were grazing peacefully on the grass that was covered in dew, the birds were resting peacefully in their trees, and the water was still. It was a genuine instance of shadow clone jutsu. Peace. Like all good things, though, the moment was cut short by the abrupt shout, which sent the birds skyward and the grazing animals scrambling for cover as a small clearing filled with white clouds and billows of smoke. When it cleared, a huge sea of blondes with whiskered cheeks was visible. They were all facing their creator and standing at full attention. "All right, everybody," the creator yelled. "Start with chakra control and work your way up to nin and taijutsu stances. Dispel the best in every group every hour." The clones responded with a salute, "Yes boss," before beginning their various tasks. Naruto sighed at the antics of his clones, who always gave him a mock salute when he gave them an order. Did they really have to do that? I wonder, he asked himself. Regretfully, someone heard it and giggled in amusement. Naruto's somewhat irritated expression lightened considerably as he nodded enthusiastically in response to Akane's statement. "Okay, now that the clones are working on what needs to be done, summon me and we can get down to some real training." Naruto slammed his hand down after biting his thumb and passing through the necessary hand seals. A column of smoke appeared, and a moment later it cleared to reveal Akane standing there grinning slightly. She said, "Morning Naru-kun," with joy. "N. Alright, one thing I should mention is that Akane's speech will be bolded when she is speaking from inside the mindscape or in her fox form. Otherwise, it will be in regular text. Good morning, aka Chan." Naruto smiled as he said hello. Every time he saw one of his girls smile, it made his day. "Now to training," Akane said, her expression turning solemn as all signs of joy vanished from her face. "Right," Naruto said, his face reflecting Akane's. When Kushina was mentioned, Akane's eyes took on a nostalgic expression. "Now some of the jutsu I'm going to be training you with are techniques that both me and your mother worked together to create. Most of them we never had the time to finish." As Naruto was stunned, he said, "My mother?" Other than the chakra chains for which his mother had gained notoriety, he had no idea that she had developed any other jutsu. Akane nodded. "Keep in mind though, Naruto, we wanted to make several, but never had the time to finish them all. So you'll be working on theory alone for most of the training," she grumbled. Naruto gave a sorrowful nod. Although he detested working solely with theory, he developed the majority of his original methods purely out of instinct or from prior knowledge. Variants of the Rasengan were excellent illustrations of this. "But for now, and since you haven't been able to find a sword that is balanced right, you'll be learning the one that we actually were able to create," Akane assured you. When Naruto heard this, he became alert and looked up to see Akane looking focused. Her hands were in front of her, one over the other, as if she was holding a handle of some sort. As an orange glow started to emerge in and above her hands before igniting into flames, she exclaimed, "This, Naruto, is the fire sword. 1. When the flames first emerged, they formed a blade. The blade itself was slightly curved and occasionally appeared to spark from the tip. Naruto examined the weapon further and discovered that Akane was holding a pure flickering flame in place of a handle beneath the hilt. It was a sword, or more accurately, a fire chakra-only katana. He looked at the weapon in Akane's hands, and his eyes widened in comical shock. How, when, he stammered in astonishment, gesturing to the flaming sword with a trembling finger. When she saw this, Akane grinned a little and remarked, "Like I said, Naruto, this is the fire sword. And like you can probably tell, it is made entirely out of fire chakra." Kushina had a similar technique, but she used her water chakra instead of fire since that was her element. It can cut anything just like a real sword, and it can maintain battle with an actual blade made of metal, making it just as, if not better than, a real sword. Even better is that, as long as you keep a constant flow of chakra to it, it never needs to be sharpened. Naruto nodded as if her explanation had suddenly jolted him out of his reverie. When Akane noticed that he was paying attention to her again, she went on, "Now using this is not easy, allowing the technique to fade. It is, in terms of human jutsu rankings, a high B rank, and one of the hardest to learn since it requires chakra shape and nature manipulation to be in perfect sync, and is fairly chakra taxing in an extended battle." When Naruto heard this, his eyes widened once more. He had assumed as much, but it was shocking to learn that it was a B rank. He whispered, "Kinda sounds like the Rasengan." Akane said, "Actually it was based off that." Naruto raised an eyebrow at her. With a sigh, she clarified. As her hands resumed their sword-holding positions and a faint red haze of Akane's Yuki demon chakra formed, she remarked, "Kushina and I based this off the Rasengan since it requires a high level of chakra manipulation and control, just like Minato based the Rasengan off the tailed beast bomb. However, instead of rotating your chakra in your palm, with this you must expand your chakra and mold it into the shape of a sword." The blade took shape again, this time out of pure chakra, and as Akane focused harder, the haze started to clear and condense. As the sword exploded into flames once more, she remarked, "Then, as it takes shape you add the wanted element to it. But like I said before, your chakra and nature manipulation need to be in perfect sync. You have no idea how many times this has exploded on us before we got the ratio right." She began to shiver. To the explanation, Naruto nodded enthusiastically. Considering the potential for a wind variant, he inquired, "Is it only used with fire chakra or can I add any element to it?" Akane, who obviously hadn't listened when she mentioned that his mother had used a water version of the sword, nodded with a drop of perspiration. "As far as I know it can be used with any element, but I can only use fire, so it's best we stick to that for now," she replied. Once more, Naruto nodded excitedly. "Then let's get to work." 3 days later, as he pulled the half-conscious blonde back to Tazuna's house, Sasuke questioned, "Honestly, Dobi, why must you do this to yourself?" "Well, you won't let me do this to you, Teme, and I doubt the others would either, so who else can I do this to?" joked Naruto with a tiresome smirk. Sasuke grinned a little because he could still find the energy to joke around even though Naruto was always exhausted. As the house appeared, the boy with the raven hair snorted, "You got that right. What are you doing out here anyway? You look like you're putting yourself through hell." Naruto, too tired to do much more, muttered, "I just want to be prepared for when Zabuza comes after us." Although Sasuke could understand that, he was baffled by what in the world Naruto was doing for training. Naruto had vanished to train on his own ever since Kakashi had first started him on tree walking and Anko had taken Sakura away to, as she liked to say, break the fangirl. And each night, he either had to be carried back after dinner or staggered in and passed out. In both cases, he appeared to have just defeated an army. Sasuke was unaware that his line of reasoning wasn't all that dissimilar from reality. Naruto had been practicing with the fire sword by sparring with his clones after he had a good understanding of how to wield it, i.e., he could use it without it exploding in his face or shimmering out of existence. Thus his tattered, soiled, and, in this case, rather charred look. The sight was becoming all too familiar. Upon entering the house, the boys noticed that everyone was seated at the kitchen table, seemingly anticipating their arrival so they could eat. Given that Kakashi could now walk around with a crutch and Anko could walk normally, despite some rib pain, it appeared that both of them were recovering well. "Oh, you're right on time," Tsunami said cheerfully as she finished serving the plates and declared that, "Dinner's ready." Naruto gave the lady of the house a feeble smile and said, "Thanks, Tsunami-san." He attempted to stand up on his own but was unsuccessful and fell back onto Sasuke. As he struggled to maintain his balance, he grunted, "Damn it, Dobi," which made the adults in the room laugh. Soon afterward, dinner was cut up and eaten. Before he could resume training, A fully recovered Naruto leaned back in his chair and contentedly digested his meal. Kakashi was reading his book. Sakura was staring at Sasuke with unidentified thoughts, Anko and Tazuna were sharing an after-dinner drink, and Tsunami was washing the dishes. Tsunami's son, Inari, scowled at the gathering. Out of the blue, Kakashi asked, "So how's training going?" Sasuke replied, "Good." Kakashi nodded, then turned to face Naruto, who nodded back. "I can get about 2/3 up the tree before my control starts to slip. It's going well, been practicing a few jutsu." Kakashi trailed an eye over Naruto's charred and bruised body and said, "I can tell." Naruto laughed sheepishly and rubbed the back of his head, saying, "Yeah. I can't fully control one of them right yet." After giving his pupil a nod, Kakashi returned to his book. Naruto turned to face the door and said, "Well, stretching, that was a great meal, Tsunami-san. I think I'll get in another hour of training before turning in." Even though it had been quiet, a voice that seemed to reverberate throughout the room asked, "Why?" Naruto sighed. Inari remained unchanged, having yet to discover a new reason to believe in heroes. Even though he wished it didn't, he knew this was inevitable and that it needed to be handled. He looked over his shoulder and saw the irate child. "Why, what kid?" The boy slammed his hands on the table and glared at the blonde, asking, "Why are you trying so hard?" The boy exclaimed, "All this training, it's all worthless. Gato has people who are stronger than all of you on his side. He's got an entire army on his side to stop you. They'll beat you, no matter what you try or say. The strong always beat the weak." After hearing this a single time, Naruto turned back to the door after glancing briefly at the boy. Calmly, he said, "Speak for yourself, brat. I'm not the type to give up without a fight." "Shut up already," Inari yelled. "Listening to you makes me sick. You know nothing of this country. You know nothing about what we've gone through, what we've had to do to survive. You know nothing about what it's like to be treated like dirt, to suffer." Tsunami yelled, "Inari," and stood up to reprimand the boy, but she and the others were stopped when they felt an unbelievable amount of murderous intent enter the room. Naruto turned, his hair casting shadows over his eyes and his head lowered, attracting their attention. Even Kakashi was perspiring from the amount of ki Naruto was released, and he thought, that was the wrong thing to say. In a low voice, Naruto questioned, "I know nothing of suffering?" Silence greeted him. He repeated the question, "I know nothing of suffering?" as his voice turned demonic and his head raised to reveal blood-red eyes, nines that protruded from his upper lip, and darker whiskers. Naruto abruptly vanished in a flash of movement and then reappeared, grabbing Inari by the shirt collar to meet his gaze. Glaring into the eyes of the terrified child who shook his head in terror, Naruto questioned, "Have you ever been hunted on the day of your birth? Have you ever been beaten, kicked, stabbed, or burned? Have you ever had to dig through garbage to simply eat?" When Naruto exclaimed, "Well, I have," people who were unaware of his condition gasped in surprise. "And all because of something happened on the day I was born, something I had no decision in. You think you've had it bad? You at least have a family, something I've never known. So stop sitting around here on your knees and get up on your feet and fight to protect them. And get something through your head, kid. There will always be someone who's had it worse than you." With that in mind, Naruto released the trembling child his grasp and entered the house. Naruto opened the door and said, "Don't look for me." He then walked out of the house, slamming the door behind him. "I'm going out to train sensei." After Naruto left, the house fell silent for a while. Kakashi and Anko were the only ones who dared not speak because the argument was still reverberating in their minds. They were staring down in embarrassment because they had been a part of the ambush squad that was supposed to protect him but had failed to do so. Terrified by the response, Tsunami whispered, "W was what he said true?" Kakashi sighed and shook his head after glancing up at the women. The others stared at him in confusion as he muttered, "No, if anything." That was the sugar-coated version. The room echoed with gasps. Tsunami shakily said, But why would your village do that to a child?" Kakashi sighed once more before beginning to tell Naruto's life story. The older two civilians nodded as he said, "You see, a great beast attacked the village the day Naruto was born. You heard about the nine-tailed fox? Well, the fourth Hokage managed to defeat it, but it cost him his life. Naruto's birth on that day is a reminder of what the village lost. Somehow the villagers took his birth as a sign of him being the fox reborn in the body of a child." He continued, drawing more gasps, this time from his team. "You see, Naruto lost both his parents to the fox that night. He grew up an orphan and as a result grew up with very few people who actually cared for him amongst all the hatred the rest of the village had for him. He was kicked out of the orphanage at the age of 6. He had to live on the streets for a few months before the Hokage found him and gave him an apartment. But he had already been beaten several times by then. The Hokage actually found him while he was getting beaten. What Hokage-sama did to the civilians and the few ninja in the group. Kakashi sighed. He hoped to never see Sarutobi angry again because that was the only time he had ever seen it. Kakashi looked down as he recalled the night and said, "I'm going to spare you the details, but it was brutal. I, having been guarding the Hokage at the time, was assigned to take Naruto to the hospital. I had never seen someone with so many injuries before. He had most of his ribs broken, a shattered kneecap, a punctured lung, and a knife stabbed through his kidneys. How he managed to stay awake through it all, I have no idea. He wasn't expected to make it through the night due to internal bleeding." He raised his head to see everyone looked horrified. Somehow though, Naruto managed to pull through and make a full recovery. That day, when he woke up, was the first and last time I had ever seen Naruto cry. I know he used to cry a lot about what his life was like, but that was the only time I've ever saw him do so, but since then he has never shed a single tear. I think he realized crying over his life wouldn't accomplish anything and decided to do something about it. He turned his attention to Inari. That was when he was no older than you, Inari, he said as the boys stared at him in disbelief. Trust me when I say this, Naruto knows better than anyone else what it means to suffer, he concluded. Remember Inari, even though Naruto said harsh things, that's probably what he told himself. Kakashi's story came to an abrupt end when loud explosions began to resound far away. They were too preoccupied with the revelation to move, even though everyone was startled by the ground-shaking sounds. Naruto angrily swung the fire sword at a tree, sending a crescent-shaped wave of fire that sliced and burned through the tree, complaining, "Stupid brat, thinks nobody else knows what pain is." The tree collapsed onto the flaming ground. As he continued to wreak havoc on the forest, he muttered, "Compared to me, he's had it easy." He had experienced it before, so he knew that Inari would say what he did, but it still reminded him of his life before he became a ninja. His repressed rage and hatred for the village also surfaced along with the memories. Recalling what he had attempted to forget was painful. He dropped to his knees and stared at the floor, asking himself, why? For what reason was he despised? For what reason had his father condemned him to an eternity in hell? Why were the memories unable to remain buried as they should have? In his mind, he heard Akane say, "I'm sorry." Confused, he asked back, "What? Why? What is the reason behind Akane's apology to him?" Akane sniffled, "I'm sorry for what you had to go through because of Emmy." Her eyes grew wide. Was she crying? As Naruto emerged in the mindscape, Akane felt herself suddenly encircled by powerful arms. With all of his rage gone, Naruto said quietly, "Aka-chan, there's nothing to be sorry about, it wasn't your F." She yelled, "Yes it was, Naruto," as she withdrew and gave him a glare while tears were streaming down her cheeks. "I may not have been myself, but I can still remember that night," she shouted. "I can still remember feeling the glee running through me as I killed those shinobi, the feeling of their blood on my hands, the feeling of ending so many lives. I can still remember that night like it was yesterday, and the scary part of it is, I loved it," she whispered while staring at her shaking hands. "How can you be with me after all I've done, Naruto? How can you be with a killer, someone who took pleasure at what they've done? How can you be with an M?" Slap, as Naruto withdrew his hand, Akane stood stunned, clutching her stinging cheek. "Don't you dare call yourself that." He glared angrily. He muttered, "Don't you dare call yourself something you aren't." Akane's eyes started to water once more. "Akane, I am not with a killer. I'm with a beautiful, kind and caring woman. When I'm down you and Tenten pick me up. You two care about me and I care about you." He looked her in the eyes. "So tell me Akane. Would a monster do that? Would a monster care about others? Would I fall in love with a monster?" As Akane finished saying, "W-wa," Naruto's lips smashed into hers in a passionate kiss. Drawing back, Naruto stared into Akane's crimson eyes and said, "I told you when we met Akane, I don't care what you did in the attack. You were in a genjutsu. Madara Teme was controlling you. It wasn't you who enjoyed killing those people, it was Madara. You felt Madara's glee, you felt Madara's hate for the village." With his forehead resting against hers, Naruto remarked, "Akane, you are not a monster. Sure, you may be the Kyuubi, but you are not a monster. You are Akane of the Fox clan, and you are one of the women I love." The last part made Akane's eyes widen. What did you just say?" she asked quietly, hoping she hadn't misheard him. Although they had been dating for more than a month, they had never used those 3 words together. Naruto gave the women in his arms a gentle smile and said, "You heard me, aka Haim. I love you." When Akane heard those words she had been dying to hear, her eyes widened once more and started to water. As Naruto noticed her eyes welling up with tears, he started to worry that he had said something incorrectly. He started to say, "AKAMMPH," but was interrupted when Akane's lips met his. He was momentarily taken aback, and then he gave it back. With tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks, Akane drew back to catch her breath and grinned at Naruto. She muttered, "Thank you, Naruto-kun. I love you too." After his own eyes widened, Naruto returned her smile. He pulled her into an embrace and said, "Please don't blame yourself for something that wasn't your fault, Haim." Akane nodded into his shirt and sniffed softly, whispering, "I'll try not to." She closed her eyes and listened to Naruto's heart. For several hours, they sat in that position, feeling as though a heavy weight had been removed from their shoulders. They found inner peace in this position, and while holding each other in their arms, they gradually fell asleep. A young woman strolled along a path through the wave forest while humming a gentle melody to herself. Her pink kimono was fastened with a dark brown choker around her neck, a pair of light brown sandals with dark straps, and a plain white obi, or is it a sash, tied in a bow around her waist. She had a narrow but attractive face, large dark brown eyes, dark black hair that was worn down her back, and fair, if slightly pale, skin. This was Haku Yuki, the last of the Ice bloodline, Zabuza's apprentice, weapon and tool, and an unidentified Yuki clan heiress. She was currently searching for herbs to aid in her master's recovery. Speaking of the man, even for someone like him, Zabuza was recuperating at a remarkable rate. After the injuries he sustained from his fight with the Konoha and Haku's use of pressure points to create a false death state, most people would still be bedridden and immobile for a week or two. She was unsure whether it was his robust constitution or the fact that she had previously knocked him unconscious using the same technique, but Zabuza was already getting better and moving around, and she expected to be fully recovered in a few days at the latest. Before they attacked the bridge builder and the Konoha team, she was just out collecting herbs to help expedite that process. As her mind shifted to their task, she let out a silent sigh. The most reprehensible task they had been made to perform was entrusting a whole nation to a criminal tycoon. Naturally, neither Zabuza nor Haku were above voicing their disapproval, but they were more in need of the money than they were of their own reputation. In all honesty, Haku hoped that they could put an end to the life of perpetual travel and having to work for scoundrels and criminals in order to make ends meet. She had frequently pondered what it would be like to live in one of the main hidden villages and apply for asylum. Haku, who had never been officially recognized as a nuke nin in the first place, could do so with ease. On the other hand, Zabuza, it is unlikely because of his presence, which made that nearly impossible for him. Villages were forced to continue running because of his attempt to kill the Mizukage and his violent past as a shinobi. Haku, however, was not a fool. She knew that they would eventually be apprehended and probably put to death immediately for outrunning the hunter ninja. The young ice user was deeply saddened by the idea of losing the person who had taken on the role of father figure in her life. She was aware that Zabuza was the closest thing she had to a family, but she was unable to express it because she was his weapon. She was a tool first and foremost, and nothing short of a miracle would alter her unwavering loyalty. As she entered a clearing that she knew contained the majority of the herbs she required, her train of thought was abruptly interrupted. She was shocked by what she saw and gaped. There were long, deep gashes in several of the trees on the clearing's edge. Several others appeared to have been sliced cleanly through and dropped to the ground, where they had been left to burn, while others had fallen ash at the base of the trunks and large pieces of their bark burned off, giving the impression that they had been damaged by fire. She would obviously not be getting any useful herbs from here because the ground surrounding the clearing was lifeless. The grass had all been burned to a crisp, and the air was thick with the stench of smoke. And a boy in all black was lying there, in the midst of all the devastation, sleeping peacefully. Haku's eyes narrowed a little as she realized he was part of the Konoha team guarding their target. In addition, based on what she could see, the boy was quite strong. After all, few people could have blown away Zabuza's mist as effectively as he had. He posed a danger to her and her master, one that would need to be addressed. She moved slowly toward the blonde, her hand aiming for his throat. As one of the boy's hands sprang out and seized her wrist, Haku suppressed a startled gulp. The blonde smirked as his eyes opened and said, "I wouldn't try to wake a sleeping ninja, miss." After giving the blonde a long look, Haku smiled sheepishly and said, "Right, sorry, mister. But you do know that you'll catch a cold if you sleep out here, don't you?" After getting up and stretching, Naruto turned to face Haku and grinned back, saying, "No need to worry about that. I've never been sick a day in my life." He pretended to be interested in something he already knew and said, "The name's Naruto Uzumaki by the way. What's yours?" Haku smiled slightly and said, "It's Haku. Nice to meet you, Naruto-san." Naruto returned the smile, but he stiffened as a gust of wind caught his nose. "And no way," he pondered. "Haku is a girl. She told me, however, that she was a boy." In the meantime, Akane was giggling uncontrollably in the mindscape. She laughed and said, "Ha ha ha ha, oh this is rich," she exclaimed. "At least now you know that you've never had those thoughts about a boy, because he was she all along," and then burst out laughing again. Naruto shuddered in his head. Despite being informed that Haku was a man, he had always been perplexed by her actual gender, and now his suspicions were validated. "Thank you for that, Kami," he reflected with genuine gratitude. Naruto looked away from his thoughts and noticed that Haku was still standing there. Same here, but what are you doing out here this early?" he asked. He hadn't been particularly aware of the time the last time, but now that the sky had only just begun to lighten, he could see that it was probably 5 or 6 in the morning. With a basket half full of different plants, Haku replied candidly, "I'm gathering herbs." Playing along, Naruto asked, "Herbs?" Haku nodded and then scowled as he surveyed the demolished clearing. "Yes, there are several species in the area that are perfect for helping people heal and recuperate from injuries and diseases." She turned back to the blonde and said, "Unfortunately though, it seems that I will be unable to find what I need here." Naruto rubbed the back of his head and laughed sheepishly. "Yeah, sorry about that." Haku nodded while giggling a little, which Naruto thought was adorable. "But what about you, Naruto-san? What are you doing sleeping out here, in the middle of a forest?" The blonde half lied and said, "Oh, I was training. I guess I must have overdone it and fallen asleep." Technically, he had been training, but he paused in the middle to console Akane when she became agitated. "So, would you like any help in finding those herbs?" he asked. "As an apology for destroying the ones here?" After giving it some thought, Haku replied appreciatively, "That's very kind of you." Talking about a variety of subjects, the two headed into the forest, pausing occasionally to gather herb that Haku claimed she needed. Before long, they were perched on a cliff with a view of the sea. The sun had barely risen above the horizon. Carefully selecting herb and placing it in the basket, Naruto said casually, "You sure like to get an early start to the morning, don't you, Haku-chan?" When the honorific was added to her name, Haku blushed a little before responding, "I like it in the morning, it's peaceful at this time. It makes me feel that all is right in the world." She smiled slightly and stared softly at the rising sun. The girl was right. The forest was peaceful in the early hours of the morning. Naruto nodded to her. He found himself staring at Haku's face instead of the rising sun. The way she smiled, as though nothing was wrong, caused Naruto to lose himself in her beauty and his heart to race. As she looked through the seal, Akane grinned because she thought the two of them would look good together. In addition, if her memories of Naruto were accurate, Haku had had a difficult life prior to meeting Zabuza. Yes, Haku would blend in quite nicely with their small group, she thought as she nodded. When Haku asked, "So you said you're a ninja, Naruto?" Naruto jolted out of his reverie to find her still gazing off into space. He returned his focus to the ocean and nodded. He flicked his headband and said, "Yeah, I'm a ninja of Konoha." Haku turned her head to face the boy next to her and said, "I see," she said absently, "it must be quite thrilling to be a ninja, but isn't it dangerous?" Naruto laughed and added, "Sometimes." He recalled everything he was fighting for and said, "But that's why I train. So I can become stronger, not only so that it won't be dangerous, but so I can protect those I care about. I will never again stand by and watch people I love perish as a result of my errors. I will never again watch helplessly as they are compelled to give up something for me. I'll be the one defending them this time." He reflected on the war and all the people who had had to sacrifice their lives for him. Astonished that he agreed with her assessment of true strength, Haku questioned, "Aren't you strong enough already? You did a lot of damage to the clearing back there." Shaking his head, Naruto said, "That's not enough. I can't stop training until I can beat everything that can harm those precious to me," he cried, his eyes burning with determination as he pounded his fist into his open palm. What she had just heard astounded Haku. She was standing next to a young man who shared her values and understood what it meant to be strong. He would do anything in the world to become strong so that he could defend the people he loved. A slight flush brushed her cheeks, and she found herself grinning at him. She leaned down and picked up the basket before turning to leave, saying, "Then you shall be truly strong, Naruto-kun." As she walked away, she said, I need to deliver these herbs to a friend of mine. Hopefully we can meet again. The girl froze in place as Naruto grinned and turned to watch her go, saying, I would count on it, Hunter-chan. How? Haku inquired, startled and a little afraid that he had learned. Naruto walked up to stand in front of her and grinned broadly, saying, it wasn't really all that difficult to figure out really. My sense of smell is pretty strong and I can recognize a person by the feel of their chakra. He clarified. The hunter nin who rescued Zabuza had a particular scent, similar to an ocean breeze, and their chakra felt cold. Both your scent and chakra are the same as the hunter nin's. 1. With a shaky nod, Haku subtly formed a pair of senbon from her chakra. With her arms ready for battle, she questioned, then what will you do, now that you know? I don't want to fight you, Haku-chan, but you can pass a message on to Zabuza from me, Naruto said, laughing and raising his hands in defense. Now that she was certain her person was safe, Haku let the senbon fade and asked, message? After giving a nod, Naruto took a scroll out of his pocket. He made a hand signal and vanished in a gust of wind after saying, give Zabuza this and tell him that you both can come to Konoha with my team. I'm pretty tight with the Hokage so I can convince him to let you guys live in the village. Haku gazed puzzledly at the scroll in her hands. Why wouldn't Naruto attempt to apprehend and question her? Why would he simply release her? Why not ask her to guide him to Zabuza so he could kill him and put his client in danger? When Haku put the scroll in the basket and left for the forest, she blushed because she couldn't comprehend it until a voice in her head said, you are precious to him, child. He would sooner die than hurt one of his precious people. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Perhaps, just possibly, you are the miracle I've been waiting for. The blonde in front of them was yelled at by the entire Team 7. You did what? Naruto rubbed the back of his head and laughed sheepishly. Returning to Tazuna's place after Shunshin, he went on to explain what had happened between him and Haku as well as what he had offered them. It goes without saying that they were unhappy. Naruto remarked, you heard me. Kakashi squinted at the bridge of his nose and said, so let me get this straight, you meet Zabuza's apprentice while she was out gathering herbs to heal him. After nodding, Naruto said, that's right, and instead of capturing her for interrogation you helped her gather said herbs. Yep. And when the said herbs were gathered you gave her a message to give to Zabuza, offering them asylum in Konoha. Yes. At last, Kakashi exploded, flinging his arms in the air and exclaiming, are you insane? Naruto shrugged and smiled silly. Maybe, he said. Given all the crazy things he had done in his life, it was feasible. After a long moment of staring at his blonde pupil, Kakashi sagged in his chair and said, okay then. I'll trust your decision. What? Anko asked, looking at her superior in disbelief. Nobody else spoke because they were all too shocked by Kakashi's choice. There, Kakashi stopped her, saying, be but calm. And if this doesn't work, then we take them out before they pose a greater threat, simple as that. 2. Kakashi explained before turning to face Naruto. But nothing, Anko, he said, turning to her with a serious look in his lone eye. I'll admit doing this is a risk, but the pros far outweigh the cons. If Naruto is able to pull this off, then not only will the village gain 2 more shinobi, but it will also gain a new bloodline. However, if they do decide to go with us, Naruto, you will be held responsible for their actions, you got it? Naruto gave a sympathetic nod. Before getting out of his chair and heading out the door to continue his training, he said, I understand, sensei. To be honest, he was a little anxious about Zabuza's choice because they would have to take him and Haku out if he didn't join them. He would have to bear the consequences if they did and then betrayed them. Naruto shook his head, refusing to consider such things. He was sure Zabuza would join them, even if it meant disclosing his position as the heir to the Namikaze and Uzumaki clans. Naruto was so absorbed in his thoughts that it wasn't until he felt a hand on his shoulder that he realized someone was standing behind him. Naruto froze in mid-step, his eyes wide, and he looked over his shoulder to see Anko Matarashi's light brown eyes. Her smile was evil. Hello Gaki, too, she said. Before his vision turned black, Naruto felt his world start to spin. I think it's time you answered my questions. A break in scene. Beneath his mask, Zabuza grinned while using his hand to smash an apple. He was getting big doses of his strength back every day. He would soon be able to complete his mission since he would be in fighting condition. As his mind shifted to the bridge builder and the Konoha team protecting him, the man sighed softly. Being a bodyguard and dispatching hordes of pursuing hunter ninja was more than he could handle, and he sincerely wished he had not accepted this assignment. Murdering a defenseless man who was attempting to act morally toward his family. Not at all. To be honest, he wished he wasn't on the run and had to work at jobs like this to support Haku and himself. You know, he had some honor. The one he considered a daughter came into his mind, and he sighed once more. Haku deserved a life very different from her own. Instead of living the life of a ninja on the run, she deserved to live a peaceful, contented life in a village somewhere. Instead of being an emotionless tool, Haku deserved to meet a nice boy with whom she could fall in love and begin a family. However, the boy would need to prove himself to him before he could approach this man's daughter if she ever met one of those boys. When had Zabuza begun to consider Haku as such? He grinned at the last thought. Actually, he had no idea, but he would be damned if he didn't feel proud of himself for raising a girl like Haku. Damn, he was softening. He shook his head and sighed once more. However, that thought caused the man to chuckle a little. The demon of the bloody mist, Zabuza Momochi, falling in love with a teenage girl. The concept itself was absurd. However, he was still considering how the girl in question deserved a better life than the one she was living at the moment. Yes, he had indeed softened. The sound of the door opening startled him out of his reverie, and he turned to see Haku standing in the doorway. A basket of herbs in her arms, a slight flush on her cheeks, and a distant expression in her eyes. Zabuza, who had become tense upon seeing his daughter, said, "Good, you're back. Start getting ready, we move the day after tomorrow." Haku appeared to awaken as soon as she heard Zabuza's voice, asking hesitantly, Zabuza-sama? When the girl hesitated, the swordsman raised a non-existent eyebrow. Typically, she tells him directly what she wants. He motioned for her to speak, She reached into her basket and took out the scroll Naruto had given her, saying, "Why, you might want to read this," before giving it to her teacher, Master. Zabuza furrowed his brow, unrolled the scroll, and started reading. "Zabuza, if you're reading this, I'm Naruto Uzumaki, and I must inform you that when you kill the old man, Gato intends to turn on you. He never meant to pay you in the first place. Instead, he wants to murder you and turn in your head to get the money. Let's just say that I have my ways and stop there if you're wondering how I know all of this. However, I have to ask you to leave Gato and come to Konoha. I promise that you and Haku will be accepted there. Konoha isn't like the Mist Village in terms of bloodlines. In fact, the village practically despises them. Believe me, Zabuza, the Hokage regards me as a grandson, and I can assure you that you will be granted asylum at the very least. However, joining the shinobi ranks will be a completely different story. This is an opportunity of a lifetime, Zabuza. If not for yourself, then for Haku, who deserves a far better life than the one you two are leading. If you choose to join us, I will personally answer all of your questions. Regards. Uzumaki Naruto, the Leaf's most capricious ninja." One could see a range of emotions in Zabuza's eyes as he finished reading, with confusion and rage being the most noticeable. Anger at Gato's planned betrayal and perplexity over how this child could have known everything he did. Zabuza noticed a hopeful expression on Haku's face as she looked up. Zabuza let out another sigh. The child was right. Haku deserved a better life, one that he couldn't provide for her. This Naruto kid seemed to be able to read people's emotions without being physically present, which was strange. As Zabuza made his choice, his expression hardened. A choice that would change their way of life.
I will continue this story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.